Holding On to Love in Romance. Written by Liwen Ho. Chapter 1. Izzy. Mama, please be careful. Izzy Sutton glanced down from where she was perched on top of a ladder on the porch of her quaint bed and breakfast. Her 19-year-old daughter Gracie stared back at her with wide eyes. Izzy waved her free hand without a care and called down, "Don't worry, sweetheart. This isn't the first time I've done this. But it's raining cats and dogs right now. I don't want you to slip and fall." She handed her mom a fake garland tied with a red velvet bow in the center. A gust of wind suddenly blew a sheet of rain at them, causing drops of water to stain her pink cheeks. "Can't we wait until the rain stops? We have plenty of time to decorate for Christmas. 2 weeks to be exact. Make that 3 hours. I need the other week, 6 days, and 21 hours to finish wedding planning." Izzy released a deep breath as soon as the words left her mouth. If anyone had told her a year ago that she'd be getting married on Christmas Eve this year, she would have called them crazy. When her ex-boyfriend ran off with another woman years ago, she never expected to get a second chance at love. As a resident of romance, however, she shouldn't have been surprised. This Oregon town was well known for instigating love. She still had a hard time though believing she'd fallen for a pop singer 11 years her junior. Gracie bristled. "That's what I'm here for, Mama. I have a checklist of all the things we still need to get done, so you don't have to worry about any of it. You just need to write your vows." Izzy shook her head. When had her only child started sounding so responsible? Gracie had always been mature for her age, but Izzy supposed college had helped her grow up even more. She flashed Gracie a grateful smile. "I really don't have much to worry about, do I? Except for the vows. You're right about those. So how much have you written?" Not much." It wasn't that Izzy was avoiding the task, okay, who was she kidding? She was avoiding it. "I don't know why Chase insists on us writing our vows. Why can't we go the traditional route? Because it's special and more personal this way. And you're a writer who writes love songs, so it shouldn't be too hard to do," Gracie teased. "It shouldn't be," Izzy agreed with chagrin. Running Interlude-In used to be her day job, but her songwriting career had picked up so much in the past year, it had become her main source of income. One would think she'd have no problems writing her vows, but it was a lot harder than she imagined. Especially since she'd need to speak them out loud in front of their wedding guests. She wasn't used to being in the limelight like Chase. That's why she preferred writing songs instead of singing them. "I just want them to be perfect, you know. You only get married once. I've waited 37 years for my time to come. I want the moment to be unforgettable." With the sleeve of her waterproof jacket, Izzy pushed back some wet strands of her strawberry blonde hair that were stuck to her face. She narrowed her eyes to look for the metal hook nailed into the porch roof. Once she found the hook, she hung the garland on it with a satisfied grin. There. 2 sides down, 1 to go. She stepped down the ladder and shifted it forward a few feet. After climbing back up, she reached for the next garland Gracie handed her. When she met her daughter's gaze, she was surprised to find a wet sheen lighting up her blue eyes. "What is it? Are you okay?" Gracie nodded eagerly. "I'm just so happy for you, Mama. You deserve to find love after all these years." Izzy reached out for Gracie's hand and squeezed it gently. "I don't know about deserving it, but I sure am grateful." She paused for a moment before asking, "Are you okay with all this, sweetheart? With me marrying Chase?" Gracie's brows furrowed, creating a line above her pert nose. "Of course I am. Why would you think I wasn't? I've liked Chase since the first time I heard him on the radio. Of course, he wasn't our Chase then, he was a famous pop star we had never met. But now that I've gotten to know him, I like him all the more. He makes you happy, and that's all that matters." She was right. Chase did make her happy, so happy. Despite their age difference, they bonded over their shared love of music. Professionally speaking, they were already partners who had started writing songs together since they met last October. However, marrying Chase would not only affect her personal life, but Gracie's as well. You know, things are going to change around here. It's not going to be the two of us anymore. Mama, it hasn't been the two of us for a while now. Did you forget about my brother? At the mention of him, a large black dog bounded out of the inn. The front screen door slammed after him, adding a resounding bang to the pitter-patter of the falling rain. He skidded on his two front paws as he came to a stop at Gracie's yellow rubber boots. His tail wagged back and forth, slapping the bottom rungs of the ladder. Thor! Gracie bent down to give the now wet dog a rub behind his ears. You heard me talking about you, didn't you? She cocked her head to one side as she resumed her conversation with Izzy. As I was saying, Mama, Izzy laughed. The sweet Labrador pit bull mix she had adopted at last year's fall festival had certainly become an important part of their family. I didn't forget Thor. Thor barked in reply and bumped his head against Izzy's jean-clad legs. He nearly knocked her petite frame off the ladder in his enthusiasm. Gentle, Thor. Gracie grabbed a hold of the ladder to keep it stable. You okay, Mama? I'm fine, sweetheart. But back to what I was saying, Izzy continued, her tone sober. Things will be different after I marry Chase. When you come home from school, there will be 3 of us living together and eating together, doing everything together. She pursed her lips for a moment. Okay, maybe not everything. I doubt if Chase will want to go shopping with us. But you know what I mean. It won't be only you and me in this house. But that doesn't mean you'll stop being important to me. No matter what, you'll always be my baby. Mama, please. I'm not a baby anymore. I'm a sophomore in college, remember? I have a boyfriend. I even do my own laundry now. Izzy inhaled sharply. Gracie's face blurred before her eyes, from both the rain and the hot tears threatening to spill over. Her daughter was right. She was a young woman who could take care of herself, someone who was years ahead in maturity than she was at her age. A bittersweet smile crossed her lips. Her work as a mother was far from over, but maybe she could rest easy and let go a little bit. Just enough to focus on her new life with her husband. Gulp. Husband, that one word sent tingles down her back in a good way. She felt like pinching herself. The idea that someone as kind and charming as Chase Lockhart would want her was beyond her wildest dreams. She only hoped she would make Chase as happy as he made her. But what if she wasn't enough for him? What if he hated being stuck in a small town when he could be traveling the world? These questions niggled at the back of her mind, planting seeds of doubt. Gracie must have noticed her hesitation. She tugged at Izzy's hand. You've got a future with Chase to build. You guys are going to have so many adventures together. Writing songs, going to music award shows, meeting famous people, I can't wait to hear all about it. I'll be busy with classes and Brady, she blushed at the mention of her boyfriend's name, so, you don't have to worry about me, or at least not as much as you usually do. The earnestness in her daughter's voice warmed her heart. Other than Chase, Gracie was the one person who could brighten her day with a smile, just like she was doing now. How did I end up with such an amazing daughter? She reached down to pull Gracie into a tight embrace, resting her chin on her blonde head. A loud bark made them both jump. They watched as Thor ran toward a tall figure clad in black jeans and a jacket hurrying up the front steps. The handsome face of America's hottest pop sensation, hidden behind dark shades, greeted them. Izzy's breath hitched to see Chase. He shook his head free of rain, causing a lock of dark hair to fall into his eyes. The smile that made every teenage girl in the nation swoon was aimed at her, bringing with it a ray of sunshine on this dreary winter day. No wonder she had fallen for him. You guys started decorating without me. Chase took off his sunglasses and hung them on the front of his shirt. He pretended to pout as he reached them. If you had waited, you wouldn't have needed this ladder. I would have carried you on my shoulders, he added with a wink in Izzy's direction. So I could experience what it's like to be a giant, she teased him back. Thanks to the ladder, they were eye to eye for once. Hey, the view's great up here. I can easily spot things in a crowd. Just like how I spotted you. He leaned in close and tipped Izzy's chin up with one hand. Behind him, Gracie cleared her throat not so subtly. I'll let you two finish up here. I'm gonna make some apple cider for when you guys are done. She patted her leg and called out to Thor as she walked off. Come on, boy. The dog barked again and ran after Gracie, only to return after a second. He raced toward the ladder and stood up on his front paws to give Izzy a parting kiss. In his enthusiasm, he knocked her completely off balance. Izzy yelped and scrambled to hold onto the ladder to keep from falling. Her feet slipped off the rung just as a pair of large hands caught her. I've got you, Chase exclaimed. He certainly did, in more ways than one. Her heart fluttered in her chest as Chase held her gaze. He pulled her close until their foreheads touched. With nary an inch between them, Izzy relaxed in his strong arms. You were saying. You spotted me, across a crowded supermarket. Over a bin of potatoes, if I remember correctly, he added with a chuckle. That's when I knew you were the one for me. She licked her lips. Because I was picking out potatoes, she asked with a teasing lilt. Exactly. Chase's blue eyes twinkled. You know how much I love to eat. Izzy rolled her eyes. Chase was over 6 feet tall and all muscle. It seemed he could eat his weight in food, yet not gain a single pound. His quick metabolism was just one way in which they differed. It wasn't the most extreme way though. The difference that worried her the most was their opposing lifestyles. He was a big-time pop star with upward of 10 million followers. She was a small-town girl who loved staying behind the scenes. Why he had fallen for her was still a mystery. He had summed it up with one line when he proposed on Valentine's Day 10 months ago, I knew you were special the first time I saw you. She had chalked it up to puppy love or an infatuation with older women, but he said it was more than that. With the same passion he embodied to sing his songs, he'd vowed to love her for the rest of his life. And because she had never experienced a purer love, she had said yes. Now as she stared into his eyes, she saw his affection for her. A peace settled in her heart as his mouth found hers. Her stomach dropped as his warm lips kissed away the cold. When they pulled apart, he gave her what could only be described as a goofy grin. I think there might be something I like more than eating. Kissing you. Even as her body warmed to hear those words, her mind fell down a spiral of doubt. Chase had the best of intentions, but he was only 26. What if he got tired of being tied down? What would become of their marriage then? These were the questions she needed answers to before their wedding day.
Chapter 2. Chase. Here, let me do the dishes. Chase walked over to where Izzy stood in front of the stainless steel sink. The kitchen lights he'd recently installed for her shone from above, highlighting the red in her hair. His heart skipped a beat just looking at her. He took the blue checkered apron she was in the process of slipping over her head and put it on himself. I think this looks better on me anyways. Her hazel eyes lit up in amusement. Placing her hands on her hips, she gave him an appreciative once-over. Not bad, not bad. Not bad. Chase raised a brow and pulled her flush against his chest. His body instantly warmed at their contact. He loved being close to Izzy. They'd been apart from each other much too often this summer when he'd gone on tour. He dreaded having to leave her again tomorrow. Maybe you need a closer look. Are you implying I need bifocals? She gave his bicep a playful slap. I may be old, but I can still see fine, young man. He pretended to study her face, from her smooth porcelain skin and defined cheekbones to her full red lips. You are far from old. My perfect vision doesn't see a trace of a wrinkle anywhere. You look just as young and gorgeous as the day we met. Which was only a year ago, need I remind you? 1 year, 1 month, and 4 days, he remarked proudly. I've been keeping track. Her eyes widened in surprise. You're pretty adorable, you know that. He chuckled softly. It must be the apron. Chase held Izzy in his arms, wanting nothing more than to savor their time together. As much as he was a romantic, he hadn't truly believed in love at first sight until he laid eyes on Izzy. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. But theirs was more than a physical attraction, they shared a mutual respect and a passion for creativity. Izzy had also become a source of peace and calm in his otherwise noisy world of fame. He thrived in her presence, whether they were creating songs together or strolling along the streets of their small town. Moments earlier, they had finished dinner after a busy afternoon of decorating the house. He'd helped hang up the remaining garlands and also strung lights around the interlude and placard. Inside, they had switched out all the fall decor, both upstairs and downstairs, for Christmas ones. Standing here in the kitchen, he could see the fresh wreath hanging over the window at the sink. The dishware displayed behind the glass door of the cupboards featured holly, berries, and a gold trim. The aroma of cinnamon and cloves from a burning candle filled the space. As much as he enjoyed the holiday smells, he loved Izzy's scent even more. The coconut fragrance he'd come to associate with Izzy, along with her own unique scent, filled his senses. He longed to hold her like this all night, but he still had a suitcase to pack. Not to mention a sink full of dishes waiting for him. He inhaled deeply one more time before letting go. Goodbyes were difficult enough, but having to leave Izzy so close to their wedding date made it doubly hard. He chose to put on a brave face. Chase picked up a dinner plate and began soaping it. So, I forwarded my itinerary to you. I'll be reachable by phone, but just in case, I gave you the numbers for the hotels I'll be staying at in Australia. Izzy nodded as she leaned one hip against the kitchen counter. She seemed to be in a world of her own, focusing her attention on a stray thread fraying from the dish towel in her hands. The large diamond solitaire on her left hand sparkled as she pulled at the thread. She murmured in acknowledgement, "Okay, got it." He rinsed off the plate and handed it to her. Without a word, she wiped it down and placed it in a cupboard. All the while, she chewed on her lower lip the way she always did when in deep thought. Concerned, Chase rinsed off his hands, turned off the faucet, and faced her. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "I'm sorry I haven't been much help with wedding planning. All these tour dates were scheduled over a year ago before we met. You can bet if I'd known back then that I'd fall in love with my songwriter, I wouldn't have planned on traveling anywhere this year." Izzy flashed him a bright smile that did away with her pensive mood. "It's fine, Chase. Most everything is ready, and Gracie's here to help if any last-minute things come up. She poked him in the chest, just need to make sure you make it back in time for the ceremony." There was a teasing glint in her eyes, but Chase thought he saw a flash of worry cross her face. "I will. I promise. Nothing will be able to stop me from coming home. I'll even swim across the Pacific if I have to." She quirked a brow. "You do know it's 8,158 miles from Australia to Oregon?" "Okay, scratch that idea. A boat might be faster." He gave her a questioning glance. "I'm surprised you knew that bit of detail." Izzy shrugged. "I was just curious about how far away you'd be. We've never been separated by an ocean before. The farthest you went over the summer was New York." "I know. It is far, but I'll only be a phone call away. I'll answer your calls any time. Even during a concert." She gave him a small smile but shook free of his hand. Taking the wet sponge sitting on the edge of the sink, she started washing the next dirty plate. That's sweet, Chase. But don't stop a concert on account of me. You wouldn't want to disappoint your fans. He frowned. Sure, he owed his success to his loyal following, but they didn't hold a candle to the place Izzy held in his heart. She had to believe this. Izzy baby, you know you're more important to me than any concert or fan. She continued as if she hadn't heard his reply. You'll be 18 hours ahead of me, so it's more likely we'll be leaving voicemails and playing phone tag. He covered her hands with his and withdrew them from the soapy water. Wedging himself between Izzy and the sink, he leaned close to meet her gaze. He needed her full attention now more than ever. Just as he was about to speak, Thor barked loudly from the next room. The black dog ran over to them and nudged their legs, as he usually did when a visitor arrived at the inn. Sure enough, the doorbell soon chimed. I'll get it, Gracie called out to them from the next room. The sound of the pouring rain grew louder when the front door opened. Mama! Come quick! As soon as Gracie cried out, Izzy pulled her hands out of his grasp. She rushed to the foyer with Chase on her heels. What is it, Gracie? Are you okay? Nearly in tears, Gracie pointed to a man leaning against the doorframe. He wore a tattered coat that was 2 sizes too big for his thin frame. His straggly blonde hair, the same shade as Gracie's, peeked out from under a wool hat. The smell of stale cigarettes and alcohol filled the entryway. When he lifted his head, Izzy gasped. Wade! Chase did a double take. Wade? The only man he knew by that name was Gracie's father. Chase, help me, please. Let's get him inside. He's shivering. Swallowing his surprise, Chase jumped to action. He took Wade by the arm and practically dragged him to the nearest sofa. A puddle gathered on the hardwood floor under the older man's boots. As soon as Chase let go of him, he fell onto the cushions and shut his eyes. Chase stepped back, his hands on his hips. He glanced at Izzy, who had her eyes fixed on the man who had left her for another woman. Wade, what are you doing here? Izzy's voice shook with indignation. What happened to you? Wade opened his eyes, taking a moment to look around at the faces staring at him. When his gaze landed on Izzy, he grinned. Bella! Aren't you a sight for sore eyes? Come, sit. We have so much to catch up on. He spoke his words slowly as if he had trouble remembering his train of thought. Izzy bristled, her cheeks flushed red. This was not part of our agreement. I paid for part of your rehab because you promised to stay sober. This, she gestured to him, is not staying sober. Chase walked over to Izzy and placed an arm around her shoulders. He felt her body tremble in anger. Gracie sniffled and finally spoke up from the corner of the room. I don't get it. You were doing so well last week, Dad. What happened? Wade waved his hand around as if there was an imaginary fly in front of his face. He hiccuped as he answered, I got a job, sweetheart, at the diner downtown. Betty put in a good word for me, you remember her, don't you? Such a pretty little thing. She took me out to celebrate today. One thing led to another, and here I am, just 1 bottle later. It's a shame I can't handle liquor like I used to. He hiccuped again and pointed to Izzy. I had 3 good months, Bella. I just wanted to celebrate a little tonight. But I think I'm gonna need your help again. He punctuated his plea with a final hiccup before drifting off to sleep. Chase's heart ached as he took in the disappointment on Izzy's and Gracie's faces. This couldn't be easy on either of them. Izzy had used up some of her savings to get Wade into a popular treatment center in Portland. And Gracie had only established a relationship with her father earlier this year. To have Wade show up unannounced and intoxicated was a major setback. At least Wade had the clarity of mind to know he needed help. Izzy sighed and shook her head. Why? She asked to no one in particular. I'm sorry this happened. Chase consoled Izzy with a kiss on her head. I can drive him to the treatment center. Do you think they'll be able to take him tonight? I have no idea. There might be a waiting list with the holidays coming. Her words trailed off as her body sagged against his. Can Dad stay here tonight? Gracie piped up. There was a sparkle of hope in her blue eyes. Please, Mama. I want to spend some time with him before he goes to rehab again. Chase's shoulders stiffened when he heard Gracie's request. Wade, stay here. He'd sooner have his prized guitar stolen than have Izzy's ex under the same roof. As much as he wanted to protest, he bit his tongue and waited for Izzy's reply. Gracie was just a girl longing for her father's company. Who was he to intervene? However, he couldn't help the feeling of frustration that washed over him when Izzy nodded. His jaw immediately tightened. This was not the ideal situation. Not when he was flying out of romance tomorrow morning. Gracie ran over to give Izzy a hug. As Chase watched them, the two women who would soon become his family, he felt a strange twinge in his heart. The unfamiliar feeling irked him to no end. What was it? Why did something Wade had said rub him the wrong way? He replayed the older man's remarks in his head until he realized the problem. Months ago, when he had wanted to give Izzy a nickname, he'd suggested Bella. She'd been adamant about him choosing something, anything, else. He hadn't understood why, until now. Izzy had allowed Wade to call her Bella, a fact that made Chase extremely uncomfortable. For the first time in their relationship, and quite possibly the first time in his life, he was jealous. And the last thing he wanted to do was leave Izzy's side.
Chapter 3. Izzy. You're up early. Hearing Chase's voice, Izzy spun around from where she stood in front of the coffee maker in the kitchen. She'd just poured herself her second cup that morning, and it was barely 6 a.m. Eyes bleary, she blinked until Chase's face came into focus. He stood before her, dressed in his usual outfit of black jeans and a heather gray t-shirt. Even with lines of concern creasing his forehead, he looked as handsome as ever. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to do some baking. He sniffed the air. I thought I smelled apple cake. You smelled correctly. She gave him a small smile. You're up early too. I thought your flight wasn't until 10. Instead of answering her question, Chase leaned in to bridge the gap between them. His mouth pressed against hers in a gentle but passionate kiss, doing a better job of waking her up than the caffeine. When he pulled back, he gave her a bittersweet smile. I wanted to spend as much time together as possible before I leave. It's going to be a long 12 days before we see each other again. His confession warmed her from the inside out. Izzy wanted to believe his words, but part of her couldn't help wondering, if he was going to miss her so much, why would he still go? The other part of her, however, reasoned that it wasn't such a simple decision. Chase was too responsible to cancel his concert dates and disappoint hundreds of thousands of fans. As a natural performer, he also enjoyed being on stage any chance he got. Izzy understood this about him and applauded his dedication and work ethic. She'd supported him from afar when he'd gone on his national tour during the spring and summer. But the more often he traveled, the harder it became to say goodbye. Especially on a day like this when she needed his support more than ever. As if he could read her mind, Chase addressed the situation at hand. This feels like the worst time for me to leave, what with Wade showing up last night. Will you be okay getting him to the treatment center? Can Gracie go with you? Izzy released a heavy sigh and shook her head. Her sweet daughter had been so distraught last night, she'd invited her to sleep in her bed. It had been like one of their usual sleepovers, except for the fact that Gracie cried herself to sleep. I don't want to get her involved more than she already is. She's having a hard enough time dealing with her father's current state. I bet she is. Chase sighed. I wish I could stay and help. I looked into changing my flights today, but there weren't any other ones that worked with my schedule. I also thought about canceling the first couple of concerts so I could stick around longer, but so many people have put in time and effort. Don't worry about it, she interrupted with a firm tone. She was aware of the hundreds of people it took to put on a 6-city tour. There was no way she was going to be the reason they lost their jobs. Especially with the holidays approaching. She'd just have to put on a brave face and deal with this mess on her own. I'll be fine. Anyway, it's not the first time I've had to take Wade to rehab. I'm a pro by now, she added with a droll laugh. A smile lit up his blue eyes. He still appeared concerned, but he nodded. I know this must be frustrating for you. If you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen. I know. Thanks. She dropped her gaze before he could see the hot tears gathering in her eyes. As much as she wanted to pour her heart out, now wasn't the time. Not with Wade sleeping on the couch in the next room. And not when Chase had a plane to catch in a couple of hours. Chase reached out to touch her arm, then ran his fingers along the length of it down to her hand. Even through her wool sweater, her skin tingled from his touch. He threaded his fingers together with hers and pulled her into a tight embrace. Even though it's going to be hard to be apart, I think it'll make our wedding day even better. They say absence makes the heart fonder. She smirked, glad that he couldn't see her expression. Whoever had made up that saying obviously hadn't dated a pop star. Chase had been away from romance more days than he'd been in town the past year. Their time apart had only served to numb her heart. If she couldn't feel, she couldn't miss him when he was gone, at least that's what she told herself. She shrugged and replied, whoever they are certainly think they know it all. He chuckled. They do, don't they? I think this time though, they're right. Being apart will give you the perfect chance to miss me. Izzy heard his laughter resonate within his chest as she leaned against him. The sound made her happy and forget her cares for a moment. Why couldn't they stay this way forever? Life would be so much easier if they could be in the same place for more than a week at a time. She sighed. As much as she loved Chase's passion for music and his career, she hated it just as much. Chase pulled back to meet her gaze. Hey, I'm still here. You can't miss me yet. Izzy bit her lower lip as she debated telling him how she felt. Being vulnerable didn't come easily for her. As a writer, she was more used to writing her thoughts and feelings down on paper than speaking them. And even then, she wrote songs for other people and from their perspectives. Revealing her insecurities to Chase scared her. So she opted to turn the tables around. I was thinking of how much you're going to miss me, she touted. Especially my baking. His eyes narrowed, not seeming to buy her story. He studied her for a moment before answering. I hope that means I get to take a slice of cake for the road. Maybe. She pretended to ponder his request even though she already had every intention of packing the whole cake for him. And the batch of snickerdoodle cookies cooling on a rack next to the oven. If she couldn't be with Chase, sending some homemade goodies along with him was the next best thing. Whoever they were also said the way to a man's heart was through his stomach. She sure hoped they were right. I'll think about it, she added, trying to sound nonchalant. If you need convincing, I know something that will help. Chase's voice grew thick with desire as his eyes zeroed in on her mouth. He ran his thumb across her bottom lip and leaned in, morning. Izzy jumped at the sound of Wade's voice. She turned to find him in the kitchen doorway, looking more alert than the previous night. His complexion had returned to its normal shade, but his clothes were still rumpled and hair disheveled. "Wade, how long have you been standing there?" An amused grin crossed his face. "Long enough." Wade strode over to one of the cupboards near the sink and reached in for a mug. He then headed for the coffee maker, wedging his way in between Chase and Izzy. "I could really use some coffee. My head's killing me." Izzy noticed Chase's face harden at the sight of her ex. She didn't blame him. This wasn't the ideal circumstance for anyone. Except maybe Wade, who seemed to be having a little too much fun sizing up the situation. Wade poured himself a cup, then turned around to face Chase. Wade smirked as he looked at him from head to toe. "I see you've moved on to greener pastures, Bella." "Much younger, greener pastures." Heat rushed up Izzy's neck. She hated when Wade called her by that nickname, but it was a smaller issue compared to his remark about Chase. With chin raised, she spoke to him firmly. "You'll be wise to keep your opinions and thoughts to yourself, Wade. It doesn't concern you who I do or do not date." Wade shrugged and took a long sip from his mug. Even with his untidy appearance, he still had an air of confidence. One that made him both attractive and off-putting. He was definitely the latter at the moment. He quirked a brow and remarked, "Bella, you should know I'm only concerned about Gracie's well-being. The men you bring around no doubt affect her as well. You ought to think about that." Izzy's hands balled at her sides. Her nails dug into her palms like they were claws. Her mama bear side was ready to roar. The nerve of this man. Who was Wade to judge her? She'd been the one who raised their daughter into the fine young woman she was today, no thanks to him. She had half a mind to kick him out of her house right then and there. But for Gracie's sake, she took a deep breath and clamped her mouth shut. Chase noticed her struggling to keep her composure. His expression softened, and he uncrossed his arms. He stuck out his hand in Wade's direction with a polite smile. "I don't believe we've met," he remarked, his voice sounding deeper than usual. "I'm Chase Lockhart. And Izzy and I aren't dating, we're Chase." Izzy cut in quickly. She winced when the word came out louder than she planned. She softened her tone. "Would you give me a minute to speak to Wade?" "Alone?" she added with emphasis. A muscle flexed in Chase's jaw. Izzy didn't recognize the look that hardened his features. It was vastly different from his magazine cover smile. He was obviously not pleased with her request. There was no time to explain though, she only hoped he trusted her enough to do as she asked. She gave him a pointed look, hoping her eyes did the talking for her. Chase finally nodded and made his way into the hall. Izzy released the breath she'd been holding and faced Wade. She could do some damage control now that Chase was out of the room. She was fairly certain Wade didn't have a clue who Chase was, yet. Living at the treatment center for the past few months had sheltered him from any celebrity news. He had also never shared her interest in pop music, so he wouldn't have come across Chase's name or songs on the radio. Fortunately, as far as she could tell, their cover was still safe. The last thing Izzy wanted was for her ex to know she was marrying a pop star worth $12 million.
Chapter 4. Chase. "Morning, Chase," Gracie greeted him. "Are you on your way to breakfast?" Chase spun around in the hallway from where he'd been, for lack of a better word, eavesdropping on Izzy's conversation with Wade. His face heated to find Gracie looking at him curiously as she descended the stairs. He walked over to her and waved. "Oh hey Gracie. I was actually thinking of taking Thor for a walk. It'll give me a chance to have a man-to-man talk with him. Make sure he knows to watch out for you ladies while I'm away." At the sound of his name, the black lab who was following Gracie shot past her. He bounded down the steps and slid across the hardwood floor to Chase's feet. With his nose, he nudged Chase's hand then ran toward the front door. "Are you sure you want to walk him?" Gracie asked as she walked over to Chase, leash in hand. "I thought you'd want to spend time with Mama before you go." Chase nodded with a tight smile. That had been the plan, before someone so rudely interrupted them. He had no idea what Izzy was talking to Wade about, and why he couldn't be present, but he hoped it was a private matter related to his sobriety. "I do, but she's talking to your dad right now. They're likely figuring out the details of his return to the treatment center." Chase had to bite his tongue to keep from saying what he really thought of Wade. The guy, no matter how much he rubbed him the wrong way, was still Gracie's father. He needed to figure out a way to get along with the man because after he and Izzy got married, they were all going to be one big happy family. It was times like this that he realized just how much of a commitment marriage was, but also how there was no one else he'd rather marry than Izzy. Gracie's face clouded at the mention of her dad's departure. She wrapped her black winter coat tightly around herself as she crossed her arms over her chest. "I don't get it, Chase. He only got out of rehab a couple of weeks ago. I thought he was getting better." The way Gracie's bottom lip trembled reminded him of a little girl. She had an innocent spirit that made her seem much younger than a college student. He knew he'd never be a father figure to her, but he could still speak some words of encouragement. "He is getting better, Gracie, even with this setback. He came here to ask your mom for help, didn't he? That shows some improvement." "That's true. I hadn't thought of it like that." Her face brightened a little. "Thanks, Chase. You really are wise for your age. I always thought you had to be to keep up with my mama." He cracked a smile, this time for real. One would think it would be the other way around, that Izzy would have to keep up with him, but Gracie was right. Izzy had needed to grow up so quickly as a young, single mother. She'd gained much more life experience than most people her age. Chase was aware of the differences in their backgrounds, but he was also hopeful he could help bring balance to her burdens. "That's the best thing about our relationship. We both keep each other on our toes." Gracie nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's better if I walk Thor. You should stay here in case Mama needs you." Chase frowned. Gracie's words caused a pang of guilt in his heart. Even if he did stick around, it would only be for a couple more hours. But he would make the most of that time. He'd love to steal Izzy away for a walk when she was done talking to Wade. "Sure, I'll stay. I'll be back in a bit." Gracie made her way to the foyer where Thor was sitting patiently with his tail wagging. She hooked the leash onto his collar and opened the door. As soon as she stepped outside, Thor bounded after her. Alone once again, Chase headed down the hall. With his long legs, it only took him 3 strides before he was a foot outside the kitchen door. He stood in the shadows, straining to make out the conversation going on inside. "Wade, there's to be no more drinking, period. Do you hear me? You have to do better this time. I can't have you coming around here again, showing up drunk. You've got Gracie worried sick about you." "I'll do better, Bella." "But what about you?" Izzy scoffed. "What about me? You care about me, too. Wade's tone was self-assured, even boastful. I can tell you do. You're Gracie's father, so of course I care what happens to you. Wade made a sound that bordered on satisfaction. And I care about you too. Stop changing the subject here, Wade. We're talking about you. Fine, let's talk about me. For starters, let me tell you what I'm concerned about. His voice rose in volume. I think you're going through some kind of midlife crisis. What do you think you're doing with that kid? How old is he anyway? He doesn't look much older than Gracie. Chase's face heated. That seemed to happen a lot when Wade opened his mouth. He felt the muscles in his neck and shoulders tense up, as if his body was getting ready for a physical fight. With a half-foot height advantage, a toned physique from daily workouts, and youth on his side, Chase had no doubt he'd win. But his brain urged him to be the smarter, bigger man. The man that Izzy needed right now. But it was taking everything in his power not to charge into the kitchen when he heard Wade's next comment. Do you honestly think he's going to stay with you? He's probably got some bet going on with his buddies to see how long he can string you along. It's only a matter of time before he leaves you for some younger girl. Clenching his hands into tight fists, Chase waited for Izzy to reply. He couldn't wait to hear his fiancée rip into that man. If anyone could put Wade in his place, it was Izzy. Or so he thought. After a long, uncomfortable silence, Izzy released a loud sigh. In a low voice, she remarked, I'll be waiting in the car for you at 8 o'clock sharp. Don't be late, before making her way out of the kitchen. Chase managed to move further down the hallway, but not before Izzy bumped into him. He reached out to steady her, surprised at how she flinched at his touch. Hey, you okay? She pulled away and crossed her arms, as if purposely creating distance between them. I can't talk right now, Chase. I need to make some calls. Chase watched as Izzy climbed the steps, her brown knee-high boots the last thing to disappear from his line of vision. Bewildered, he shook his head. He had half a mind to go after her, but he also knew he couldn't force her to talk before she was ready. Izzy was as stubborn as she was determined. For now, he'd have to respect her wish for space. A high-pitched beep suddenly sounded from the kitchen. It continued beeping, signaling that the oven's timer was up. Izzy's apple cake had finished baking. With Izzy nowhere in sight, Chase headed to the kitchen. He dreaded being in the same room as Wade, but he would try to make nice, for both Gracie's and Izzy's sakes. He pasted on a polite smile, nodding to Wade as he passed by. So Bella has you helping around the inn now? Wade's low voice boomed and filled the entire room. Is your baking as good as hers? Chase pulled on a pair of oven mitts and grabbed the round baking pan out of the oven. He set it on top of a potholder next to the coffee machine before turning to face Wade. The man wore a cheeky grin that made his skin crawl. We all help out around here. That's what it means to be part of a family. He couldn't help the sarcastic edge to his tone. His annoyance with Wade was now bordering on resentment. The guy sure knew how to get under someone's skin. If you're not the hired help, Wade continued unhindered, then what do you do for a living? Do you have a real job? Chase almost rolled his eyes. Funny how someone who couldn't hold down a job was questioning his work status. As a matter of fact, I do. I'm a singer and a songwriter. Wade snickered. Singer-songwriter? Is that what kids these days call a real job? A muscle in Chase's jaw twitched. Even the delicious smell of cinnamon wafting under his nose couldn't sweeten his mood. I'll have you know I do very well in my job. I make more than enough to support this family. The older man balked. This family? Last I checked, this was my family, not yours to play house with. You're not man enough for Bella. Chase shook his head in disbelief. Wade was really grasping at straws now if he dared claim Izzy and Gracie as his own. Gracie may be this man's flesh and blood, but Izzy was set to marry him. A fact Chase desperately wanted to make clear. He puffed out his chest and looked Wade in the eyes. If you didn't know already, Izzy and I are getting married in 3 weeks. Wade's bushy eyebrows rose high up on his forehead. That's news to me. His gaze suddenly shifted to the entryway of the kitchen. Did you forget to invite me to your wedding, Bella? Izzy shot Chase an exasperated look before addressing Wade. I doubt you'll be able to attend if you're undergoing treatment. But that's right around Christmas. Surely, they'll let me come celebrate the holidays with my family. That's highly unlikely. Izzy crossed her arms as if to add a sense of finality to her words. I wouldn't get your hopes up, Wade. Chase frowned. He didn't understand why Izzy was so adamantly against Wade attending. In his mind, seeing the two of them tie the knot would confirm to her ex that he and Izzy were a unit. There would be no more questioning his manhood or doubting his commitment level. Why couldn't Izzy understand this? Unless there was a reason she was being so secretive. His stomach sank when he spotted her left hand. She had worn her engagement ring the night before, but now it was nowhere to be seen. Chase was more confused and disturbed than ever. It was time to get to the bottom of things before he left romance.
Chapter 5. Izzy. Izzy, wait up, please, Chase called out. Izzy slowed her steps and stuck her gloved hands into her coat pockets. She turned to find Chase running up the sidewalk to her. Hey! He caught up to her in no time with his long strides. Mind if I join you? That's fine, she replied, keeping her tone light. With the dark shades he usually wore to hide his identity in public, she couldn't see his eyes. But his wary smile told her he had a lot on his mind. Talk to me, Izzy. Why didn't you tell Wade we're getting married? I know you must have a good reason to have kept it a secret. She sighed and slowed her pace. So much for a peaceful walk. She had snuck out after Gracie returned from walking Thor, desperate to escape the tension in the house. She normally would have welcomed Chase's company, but she wasn't in the mood to talk. And the expectant look on her fiancé's face told her he was looking for answers. I didn't want Wade to know because then he'd start asking about you, who you are and what you do. And once he finds out you're a celebrity, he'll come begging for money. On second thought, begging's not his style. Blackmail, on the other hand. I wouldn't put it past him to do something distasteful like that. Chase grunted. His steps became more firm and loud, as if each one was loaded with anger. Is that why you didn't wear your engagement ring today? She nodded. I knew Wade would ask about it. Okay, that makes sense. More sense than the crazy idea I had running through my head earlier. What idea? He rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. The one where you were having second thoughts about marrying me. She stopped in her tracks. The doubt in his voice surprised her. Chase was typically all charm and confidence. This was a side she wasn't used to. What in the world made you think that? Just because it's the middle of winter, it doesn't mean I'll automatically get cold feet. Her humor seemed to fall on deaf ears because Chase didn't laugh. Sorry, that was a bad joke. His lips curved in a half-hearted smile. It wasn't too bad. Not as bad as me messing up your plan to keep Wade in the dark. He paused. I wish you'd told me about it. I would never have brought up our wedding if I'd known. I should have, but it's too late now, so don't worry about it. Even as she said the words, however, she found herself wondering how Wade would use the information to his advantage. He was bound to find out about our engagement sooner or later. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before the paparazzi find out, too. She looked past Chase to the familiar houses they were passing, each one with their lights on inside. Thanks to her neighbors and many residents of their small town, they'd been able to keep their relationship under wraps. Everyone from Mayor Walker to nosy Mrs. Cooper from next door had vowed to keep an eye out for reporters. So far no one in the media had caught on that Chase came to Romance to see Izzy. And Izzy had managed to stay out of the limelight, as she preferred. But who knew how long her anonymity would last? Chase had grown quiet. When he spoke again, he did so hesitantly. Do you think you'll ever be okay being in the public eye? With people knowing you're my wife? I don't mind people knowing, Chase. But having our friends and family know about our personal lives isn't the same as being on the cover of every magazine. If the media ever found out about us, our lives would be ruined. He tore off his sunglasses. His baby blues darkened as they focused on her. Ruined? Is that what you think life will be like when you marry me? No, Chase, that's not what I meant. Izzy tried to backtrack and clarify her previous statement. It's just that your fans want to know everything about you, including details about your love life. There are rumors going around on the internet every other day about who you're supposedly dating or not dating. Which is exactly why I want the world to know there's only one woman in my life, Izzy. You. He took her hands from her pockets and held them to his chest. The sooner people find out, the sooner those rumors will stop. She scoffed, shaking free of his hold. You're wrong. That'll just be the beginning. The next thing you know, everyone will be criticizing and judging me, wondering why you're with me. The very thought of random strangers dissecting her life made her stomach turn. Hey, when did Isabella Sutton ever care about what other people think? Chase asked with a wry smile. You told me yourself how you had to grow a thick skin living in this town where everyone knows everyone else's business. You're too smart to let gossip define you. What's changed? What changed was that she'd let Wade's words get to her. You're going through some kind of midlife crisis. What do you think you're doing with that kid? If someone who knew her personally could accuse her of being irrational, what would prevent strangers from judging her even more harshly? Romance only has 30,000 people. You have over 15 million followers, the majority of whom are female. I'm a woman, Chase. I know how petty and jealous girls can get. Your fans are going to hate me. His expression softened. They won't hate you, Izzy. Okay, maybe some of my diehard fans will, but the rest are going to love you. They're going to see what an awesome couple we are and how happy you make me. Being in the public eye will take a while to get used to, but we'll get through it, together. We just have to remind each other that only 1% of what the tabloids say is true. The other 99% is exaggerated or made up. But as long as we know the truth, we'll be okay. If Izzy had heard these words at any other time, she would have believed them. But she was feeling too emotionally spent to agree. The phone calls she'd made earlier hadn't turned out the way she'd hoped. And with Chase leaving soon, she felt so helpless and alone. I know you mean well, but the fact of the matter is that you're hardly around. We've barely seen one another this whole year. The longest you were in town was a week and a half. And now, you're leaving me again. Izzy bit her bottom lip. Had she really spoken her fears out loud? Oh baby, come here, Chase urged as he pulled her to himself. He kissed the top of her head gently and held her. You're right, this year has been a tough one. You've been doing so much, running the inn, writing songs, and planning a wedding on top of that. I'm sorry I haven't been around for you. Izzy nuzzled her head against his chest, listening to the rhythmic beat of his heart. She rested in his strong arms, content to stay there as long as she could. Things seemed easier when Chase was around. Words spoken in person sounded more true. He could also calm her fears with just one touch. She didn't know how she'd be able to get through the next week and a half. She didn't want to worry Chase though, he already had enough on his plate. So she stayed quiet and let him continue speaking. Next year will be different, Izzy, I promise. I'll push back my European tour dates. We haven't started selling tickets yet, so it should be easy to do. As soon as I'm done with this Australian tour, I'm all yours. Izzy blinked in surprise. Was Chase serious? You would do that? But what will your fans say? You've been telling them you're going to Europe next year. I'll still be going, just later in the year. A grin lit up his baby blues. How about this? We'll have the wedding and go on a honeymoon for as long as you want. We can take a road trip south and visit all the bed and breakfasts between here and Napa. After that, we can drive along the California coast and visit every major beach. It'll be a nice break from all this rain we've been having. I'm sure you'll love the sun and sand in LA. Her mouth fell open. Had Christmas arrived early? Really, Chase? You better not be joking, because that is an amazing idea. Would I joke about visiting my favorite state? He winked and murmured out of the corner of his mouth, no offense to any Oregonians, of course. I love this place, too. Izzy's mood immediately lifted. It had always been her dream to visit the bed and breakfast in Napa that her parents had taken her to as a child. It was so sweet of Chase to remember. Overcome with gratitude, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him with abandon. For the first time in days, instead of thinking and worrying, she allowed herself to feel the warmth of Chase's mouth on hers. The soft pressure of his hands on the small of her back. And the fluttering in her stomach when he pressed his body against hers. They embraced and kissed until cold drops of rain began falling down on them. Izzy looked up at the ever-cloudy northwestern sky, suddenly reminding her of her own storm brewing on the horizon. Her thoughts returned to the phone calls she'd made that morning. With all the local treatment centers currently full, Wade would need a place to stay while he was on the wait list. This meant Interlude Inn would be his home for the foreseeable future. For Gracie's sake, Izzy would put on a brave face and play nice. For Chase's sake, she would keep this bit of information to herself. She didn't want him worrying about her problems when he couldn't do anything about them. 12 days. That's all she had to endure before Chase came home again. 12 long, dreadful days.
Chapter 6. Chase. For those of you just tuning in to hit 101.3, we've got a special guest with us today, Chase Lockhart. Welcome, Chase. Thanks for having me, Chase replied into the microphone with a smile. It was day 4 of his tour, and he was still jet-lagged but excited to be in Australia. For the moment, he was in Canberra, the capital city, for a short interview and an on-air performance. The radio studio was a rectangular room equipped with color-changing light panels on the walls, speakers hanging from the ceiling, and a large U-shaped table. Chase sat in one of the red chairs at the end of the table with a bottle of water in his hands. He always felt at home in front of an audience, even when he couldn't see face to face. For now, he was fully present with the radio DJ sitting across the table from him. Shannon looked to be in her mid to late 30s with short blonde hair, a black tank top, and a Santa hat on. She had enough energy for them both, as was evidenced by her toothy grin. "How are you enjoying your time down under?" she asked, seeming to drop the G sound at the end of all her words ending in ing. "It's been good," Chase replied. "I'm really enjoying the warm weather. We had nothing but rain the past week where I came from, so this is a nice change." "You mean back home in Canada?" Shannon inquired. "You're from there, correct?" Chase nodded. "I was born and raised in Toronto. But I was talking about America. I was there for a visit just before I flew here." "Oh yes, I heard you moved out to Los Angeles a few years ago." Shannon raised a brow. "Has it been raining there?" "Last I heard, there was a drought." "No, not in California. I was actually in another state in the Northwest," Chase explained in a casual tone. He was starting to realize he'd already said more than was necessary. Any more and he might as well tell everyone listening that he'd been in Oregon. He took another sip of water and hoped Shannon would move on to another topic. "Let me guess, Oregon. When you said rain, I immediately thought of that place." "Too late now." Short of lying, there wasn't much else Chase could do to keep his personal life private. He squeezed out a tight smile and replied, "Good guess." Shannon beamed, a look of satisfaction on her face. "I knew it. I have a cousin who lives out there in a town with the most amazing name. When she first told me about it, I thought she was making it up. All the locals say it's the perfect place to fall in love." The hair on the back of his neck stood up. What were the odds she was talking about the same small town in the Willamette Valley that he called home? "You don't say. What's it called?" "Romance. Isn't that adorable? You should go visit when you get a chance. I was there last October. My cousin took me to their fall festival, and we had so much fun. There was a pie contest, hay rides, and even a pet adoption. But the best part was the food. Their apple cider was sweet as." Chase cocked his head to one side, waiting for her to finish her sentence. "Sweet as." Shannon laughed. "That's what we Aussies say to describe something that's awesome." Memories of hot apple cider embellished with a cinnamon stick flooded Chase's mind. He could almost taste the sweet and spicy flavors. The thought of it made him smile. "That's a great phrase, sweet as. I may need to borrow it sometime, if you don't mind." "Certainly not, go right ahead." She narrowed her eyes with interest. "You don't seem surprised about romance. Have you been there?" If anything, he was surprised that both he and Shannon had attended the same festival and not bumped into one another. "Romance, the town. Yeah, I have." Short and succinct, that's how he'd answer from now on. "What about the other kind?" she asked with a teasing tone. "The other kind?" Chase had a good feeling he knew where this interview was headed. It was as Izzy said, everyone wanted to know about his love life. He decided to play dumb for as long as he could. "Which kind?" Shannon rolled her eyes as she spoke into the microphone. In case you're wondering how red Chase Lockhart's cheeks are right now, everyone listening, at home, they're very red. She shot him a playful wink. It looks like our interview is going to get interesting now. Chase could feel heat rushing up his neck all the way to the tips of his ears. He hated being put on the spot like this. It was one thing to talk about himself, but another thing to be interrogated about his relationships. He knew how much Izzy disliked being the center of attention. She even used a pen name for her songwriting projects, so nobody in town knew about her side job. He needed to protect her identity at all costs. I think you know what kind of romance, Shannon continued, placing an extra emphasis on the last word, as if it would help her case. The last we heard, you were single. Has that changed? Not wanting to fib, he used another tactic, deflection. I'd rather not answer that question right now. So you are dating? Do tell us about the lucky girl. It was now getting harder to breathe. Chase didn't usually allow himself to get cornered, but the past few sleepless nights were starting to wear down his judgment. He blinked quickly and racked his brain for a way to end this topic as gracefully as possible. On second thought, he didn't have to lie or avoid the topic. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not dating. He technically wasn't because he and Izzy were engaged. Disappointed, Shannon pretended to pout. She spoke into the microphone, declaring to the audience that she would get to the bottom of this. I'm going to suss him out, you guys. Just you wait. Despite the intensity of the situation, Chase had to chuckle. You're determined, aren't you? You have to admit, this all sounds very suspicious, she continued, narrowing her eyes at him. I've done enough interviews to know when someone's keeping secrets. If anyone could get to the bottom of his secrets, it would likely be this DJ. Part of Chase hoped she would drop the subject, the other part wished to be found out. It was as he'd told Izzy, he wanted to let the world know she was the woman for him. Perhaps with that information as public knowledge, his female fans would respect his personal space. It was a shot in the dark, but he could dream. In the meantime, he owed it to Izzy to protect her privacy. It was the least he could do after he'd divulged too much to Wade. Speaking of Wade, Chase wondered if he had given Izzy trouble when she dropped him off at the treatment center. When they'd talked on the phone yesterday, she hadn't sounded like herself. She'd been distracted and had cut their call short, much to his disappointment. With the time difference, it was nearly impossible to find a moment to talk when they were both awake and he wasn't busy rehearsing or performing. What he wouldn't do to be on the same side of the planet as Izzy right now. Especially now that he sensed their relationship deepening more on an emotional level. He'd been pleasantly surprised when she'd confided about her fears on the day he left romance. Trust didn't come easily for Izzy, so for her to be vulnerable with him meant a great deal. If only they'd had more time together that morning. He hated not being able to see his fiancée's beautiful smile or feel her in his arms. His chest twinged with longing. Izzy had been right. They'd been apart far too much this past year. He didn't realize he'd sighed until Shannon remarked, "Now that's a sign of homesickness, if I've ever heard one." He ran a hand through his hair, stalling for time. I do miss my family, my mom and younger brother, a lot. It's been a while since I've seen them. Will you be seeing them at Christmas? I will. He nodded eagerly. Honestly, he was almost as excited about them flying to Oregon as he was for the wedding itself. They hadn't met Izzy in person yet, though they'd all talked on the phone and video chatted several times. They'll be flying out next week, in fact. Flying out? So you plan on spending the holidays away from home? Chase clamped his lips together. So much for changing the topic. Here he was needing to dodge questions again. That's the plan. Shannon's green eyes twinkled. You're getting smarter. I can see I'm not going to get anywhere with this probe-in. All right then. Tell me about your concert the other night at the Perth Arena. I heard it was sold out. Yes, it was a packed house. So many people came out early to greet me. I had the best time. I can't wait to perform again tonight. Tonight's in Melbourne, and it's another sold-out show. Yeah, can you believe it? I'm so grateful. My fans are the best. They've stuck with me from the very beginning. I'd have to agree with you. We are the best. Shannon grinned. I'm sure you get this next question a lot, but are you used to your new life? Not long ago, you were singing at home in front of a computer and uploading videos to YouTube. Now, you're performing shows around the world. How has your life changed since you became famous? It's definitely a lot busier now, that's for sure. I enjoy it, but it does make it hard on my relationships. Hopefully things will slow down a bit next year. I plan to take some time off after this leg of the tour is over. Time off? Shannon appeared confused. I thought you had a European tour scheduled for early spring. Not anymore. I've been traveling so much this past year, I've decided it's time to rest. That's one thing I've had to learn to do. It's easy to get caught up in writing, recording, and performing. I get such a thrill when I do those things. But at the end of the day, I'm the same guy who used to sing in his bedroom and post videos online. My fans, who are some of the most amazing people in the world, liked that guy they saw, so it's important to me to still be that same person. Even as he said these words, Chase felt like he wasn't being true to who he was. He'd always been an open book with his fans, someone who wore his heart on his sleeve. The songs he wrote and sang were vulnerable and genuine because they came from the heart. That authenticity was what people connected with. For him to keep a part of himself, the most important part, hidden wasn't who he was. Every fiber of his being yearned to tell the world about Izzy. Could he? Would he? He had to. Before he could think things through, he opened his mouth and confessed, I actually have a very important reason for taking time off. You do? Yes. He paused for dramatic effect. I'll be going on my honeymoon. Shannon's jaw dropped. The studio was so quiet, those listening probably thought the station had dropped off the air. Only after a long silence did the DJ gasp. You said you weren't dating. That's technically true. I'm not dating anyone because I'm engaged. Are you fair dinkum? Chase had to chuckle at the odd phrase. Am I what? You're not joking, are you? He shook his head firmly. Nope. It's the truth. Shannon crooned into the microphone, engaged. You heard it here first, listeners. Pop sensation Chase Lockhart is engaged. Chase grinned. A weight had finally lifted off his shoulders. He felt so free to be sharing this part of himself. The only thing holding him back was the niggling feeling that he was trading Izzy's freedom for his own.
Chapter 7. Izzy. Let me guess, are you reading a text from Chase? Izzy lifted her head to find Gracie grinning at her from the doorway of her bedroom. She placed her phone on the bed where she was sitting and nodded. How'd you know? Gracie walked over and plopped down on the bed next to Izzy. You had that goofy, dreamy look on your face that you get whenever he's around. It's pretty obvious, Mama. Who are you calling goofy? Izzy pretended to protest. Inside, though, she knew her daughter was right. As soon as she had seen Chase's message on her phone this morning, her whole body had grown warm. Just now, she'd been rereading it for probably the 10th time. She couldn't wipe the smile off her face any more than she could stop the rain from falling on romance. "I like it when you're goofy," Gracie remarked, "because that means you're happy." "You deserve to be happy, Mama." "Thank you, sweetheart." Pulling her into a tight embrace, Izzy sighed. "I am happy." Even with the gloomy sky outside her window, she felt a joy deep within. She was getting married in exactly 1 week to the man of her dreams. Chase was sweet and kind and giving. The fact that he'd agreed to postpone the rest of his tour for her touched her deeply. It wasn't only his grand gestures that impressed her, it was also his everyday thoughtful acts that showed her how much he loved her. Since he'd left for Australia, he'd arranged to have roses delivered to the inn every single day as a sort of countdown to the wedding. Today's bouquet of 7 purple roses interspersed with red berries had arrived in a crystal vase shaped like a guitar. They sat on her bedside table, filling the entire room with a sweet fragrance. With all the vibrant blooms displayed throughout the house, she felt more hopeful and positive that things would work out. Of course, it would be nice if her ex was truly out of the picture like she'd told Chase he was. Wade was like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. As if he could read her thoughts, his blonde head popped through the door. He wore the one pair of worn jeans he owned along with a blue and yellow plaid shirt. His eyes lit up when he saw them. "Gracie, thanks for letting me use your phone for my important call. I left it on your bed." Gracie smiled. "No problem, Dad." He tipped his head in Izzy's direction. "Bella." Izzy sat up straight and gave him a curt nod. "I'd appreciate it if you remembered to call me by the name I go by." He shrugged. "Old habits die hard. I always thought Bella suited you better, you being so beautiful and all." Gracie looked from one parent to the other and back again. She cleared her throat, seeming to sense the tension in the room. "Hey Dad, do you want to go with me to Valley Market? I need to pick up some apples to make more cider for when Brady comes next week." "Sure, sweetheart, I'd love to go with you." He rubbed his large hands together. "I can't wait to meet this boyfriend of yours. I hope I get to stick around a few more days so I get to talk to him." Gracie laughed nervously. "I guess we'll see what happens. Give me a few minutes. I'll meet you downstairs when I'm done talking with Mama." "Yep, take your time," he remarked before taking off down the stairs. When Wade was out of earshot, Izzy released the breath she'd been holding. It was amazing how a man she had once felt so much for could make her skin crawl now. That's how much youth and a rebellious spirit had clouded her judgment. Thank goodness Gracie was much wiser and cautious. At least Wade seemed to be a more considerate and committed father than he ever was as a boyfriend. She would hate for Gracie to be disappointed by him. If, or more likely, when, he let her down, she would have no qualms about letting him fend for himself. Izzy realized Gracie was staring at her with concern. She reached over and smoothed some strands of blonde hair away from her face and tucked them behind her ear. "What is it? Are you worried about your dad?" She shook her head. "I'm more worried about you, Mama." "Me? Whatever for?" Gracie chewed her lower lip before answering. "I know having Dad here stresses you out. And that's on top of the stress you already have from wedding planning." She waved her hand to dismiss her daughter's concerns. "Don't you worry about me. I'm doing all right. We've got everything under control. I picked up my gown from the dry cleaners already. You confirmed the menu with the caterer. The programs will be delivered in a few days. There's really not much left to do. What about your vows? Izzy wiped her palms along her dark skinny jeans. Okay, so there was one thing left on her to-do list. She took a deep breath before releasing a nervous laugh. They're coming along. When Gracie's expression turned skeptical, Izzy rolled her eyes. I'll work on it today, okay? I'm sure all these flowers will give me the inspiration I need. Great. 'Cause Chase made me promise to remind you until you wrote them. Izzy smirked. How did he know I hadn't written them yet? Gracie grinned. I think he knows you pretty well, Mama. I suppose he does. I'm gonna go now and let you work. She hopped off the bed and headed to the door. Before she left, she spun around and asked, Do you want me to call the treatment center and see if any space has opened up? I can do that, Gracie. You just take care of your dad. Don't worry, I will. She paused for a second. Thanks for letting him stay here this week. I know you're doing it for me. Izzy felt her heart sink. The guilt on Gracie's face tore her up. She rose and joined her daughter at the door. Hey now. Remember, you're the child, and I'm the parent. I can handle having him around. He's your dad, and you deserve to spend time with him. Thanks, Mama. But I really hope a room opens up for Dad before the wedding. As much as I love him, it would be kinda strange for him to attend. I don't think Chase would be happy either. She sighed. I agree. She reached over and gave Gracie a gentle squeeze. Be careful driving in the rain, she added before watching Gracie head downstairs, her ponytail swinging behind her. Alone once more, Izzy grabbed a notebook and pen from a drawer and sat on her bed. She glanced at her watch, noting she had some time to work on her vows before Chase was scheduled to call at 3 p.m. With the time difference, it would be 9 in the morning for him, right when he woke up. For the next 30 minutes, she listed out a dozen reasons why she wanted to marry him, beginning with number 1, he's passionate, to number 11, he makes me feel alive. When she reached the last point, her eyes welled up with hot tears. Number 12 was probably the easiest one to name, yet it was also the most significant reason of all, he's trustworthy. Trust had never come easily for Izzy, especially when it came to men. But Chase wasn't like the other guys she had foolishly fallen for in the past. Chase was patient, giving, and kind. Those were the very traits that made loving him second nature. And being apart from him so agonizing. A thought came to Izzy as she considered the aching in her heart. It was such a simple realization, she couldn't believe she hadn't come up with it sooner. Instead of having Chase postpone his European tour, she could join him and make their stay a working honeymoon. With the stricter paparazzi laws overseas, she hoped life in the public eye would be easier to handle. It would be a good way to ease into Chase's celebrity lifestyle, something she admitted she'd have to embrace sooner or later. For Chase's sake, she would aim for the former. He was willing to sacrifice so much for her, the least she could do was meet him in the middle. She grinned as she imagined his reaction to hearing her plan. She couldn't wait to tell him when he called. She picked up her pen and drew several hearts across the bottom of the paper. In each heart, she wrote Chase plus Izzy in blue ink. She giggled, feeling like a schoolgirl with a crush. Or a woman head over heels in love. The page was filled completely with hearts and curvy letters by the time her phone rang. She immediately answered. Chase. How are you? I've missed you. Izzy baby, it's so good to hear your voice. I miss you, too. Did you sleep okay? She frowned. His voice didn't have its usual energy. You sound tired. I'm fine, just worn out from last night's concert. But I'm feeling much better now that I'm talking to you. Good, because there's something I want to talk to you about. Chase paused. Actually, there's something I need to tell you, too. The familiar high-pitched clicking of Thor's nails against the hardwood floor echoed in the distance as he came running upstairs. Soon after, the sound of footsteps, followed by Gracie's voice, traveled down the hallway. Mama. I'm on the phone with Chase, Izzy called out. What is it? Thor poked his head into the bedroom first and trotted over to nudge Izzy's leg. Gracie then appeared in the doorway, her big blue eyes rounder than usual. There's someone here to see you. A reporter. It took a few seconds for Gracie's words to register. Why would someone want to interview her? She didn't want to know the answer, but she forced her feet to move down the hall. Her heart pounded with each hesitant step she took down the stairs.
Chapter 8. Chase. Chase, can you hold on for a minute? Izzy asked. Someone's at the door. Sure thing, Chase answered Izzy as he cradled his cell phone against his shoulder. He rose from his bed and pulled on a pair of black jeans. With bare feet, he walked across the hotel room to a large window. As he pulled back one half of the blackout curtain, rays of sunlight streamed in. He basked in the warmth, marveling at how Australia would soon be celebrating Christmas in the middle of summer. How strange that he and Izzy were experiencing opposite seasons on the same day. It was another reminder of how far they were at the moment from each other. His ears perked up as he heard Izzy speak, her words muffled as if she were holding the phone far from her mouth. He also picked up on a second voice, a male one, that sounded loud and insistent. Chase pressed the phone to his ear as he strained to make out the exchange. No. Izzy shouted. No pictures. Pictures? Was someone trying to take photos of the bed and breakfast? Chase ran a hand through his hair, anxiously waiting for Izzy to get back on the call. Incessant barking in the background added to his concern. Thor never got this worked up when visitors came. What was going on? Chase. He was relieved to hear a female voice finally come over the line, but it wasn't Izzy's. Gracie. What's going on? Where's your mom? She's trying to get this reporter to leave. He just showed up out of the blue with his whole camera crew. I think they're from a tabloid magazine. Her voice lowered as she continued confiding in him. They're asking Mama if she's going to marry you. Chase groaned and hung his head. His chest tightened as he realized the paparazzi had already found Izzy. How had they known who or where she was though? He hadn't even told the radio DJ her name, despite her asking him several times during the interview to talk about his fiancée. He may have revealed their engagement, but he had every intention of keeping Izzy's identity a secret for as long as she wanted him to. This was not how things were supposed to unfold. They have no right harassing her, Chase remarked to Gracie, especially at home. How's your mom holding up? She's trying to deny it and tell them she doesn't know you. I don't know if the reporter's buying it though. He's being really pushy. He keeps telling his cameraman to take pictures. Gracie paused. What should we do, Chase? Several questions ran through his mind as he digested Gracie's words. How could he help Izzy when he was halfway around the world? And would she forgive him for spilling the beans? But there was one thought that caused his stomach to sour. How could Izzy insist she didn't know him? They were set to be married in exactly 1 week, yet she didn't want anyone to know. How could a woman in love hide who she was in love with? As much as he wanted to dissect Izzy's behavior, Chase pushed his insecurities aside. He had one objective in mind, and that was to protect the woman he loved. Give me a second, Gracie. Stay on the line, okay? Pressing the home button on his phone, he switched screens to his messages. He located the number he needed and quickly typed out a text to his bodyguard. John, can you send one of your guys to Izzy's now? It's an emergency. Thanks. 3 dots appeared on the screen before John's reply came in. I'm on it. My guy will be there in 5. Chase exhaled a deep breath and returned to his call. Gracie, are you there? Yeah, I'm here. Her usually sweet voice was tense. The reporter won't leave. I can't believe it, but he's as stubborn as Mama. Under any other circumstances, Chase would have laughed. That reporter didn't know who he was messing with. I'm sure she can hold her own against him, but I'd prefer her not to waste her breath. Don't worry, help is on the way. I asked my bodyguard to send someone over. He knows people in romance. Someone should be there soon. Oh, thank you, Chase. That's a relief. For a second there, I was worried that things might get physical. Physical? Adrenaline pumped through Chase's body at the thought of someone laying a hand on Izzy. His own hand balled into a tight fist. What do you mean? Did he try to hurt her? Is your mom okay? Oh, no, nothing like that, Gracie exclaimed. Mama's fine. I meant my dad. He tried to step in and tell the reporter that he'd asked enough questions. And then the reporter started asking him questions, which made him mad. Your dad. Chase didn't mean for his words to come out as a growl, but he couldn't help it. The mere mention of Wade unleashed something primitive in him. He clenched his jaw. There had to be some mistake. Hadn't Izzy said she dropped him off at rehab last week? Hold on, Gracie. Your dad is still there. Yeah, he is, Gracie stammered. Did you not know? He's been staying at the inn this whole week. Yeah. The treatment center was full, so Mama put him on the waiting list. She's been calling every day to see if there's an opening, but so far, there hasn't been. I had no idea. I was under the impression he'd left the same day I flew out. Oh, Chase could almost picture Gracie's furrowed brow when he heard the hesitation in her voice. He imagined how awkward she must be feeling to be the bearer of bad news. It's all right, Gracie, he tried to console her. Don't feel bad. This is a matter between your mom and me. I'll talk to her. Please don't be mad at Mama, Chase, Gracie pleaded with him. I'm sure she had good intentions for what she did. He sure hoped Izzy did. Because the idea that she'd not only kept a secret from him, but had also lied, didn't sit well with him. At all. How were they to have an open and honest marriage when they were already keeping things from each other? Chase swallowed hard. He wasn't innocent either. It was his fault that a reporter was harassing Izzy. Guilt weighed down on him heavily. He slumped onto the hotel bed and fell back against the pillows piled along the headboard. He shut his eyes and sighed. Both he and Izzy had some explaining to do. I'm not mad, Gracie, he reassured her. Surprised, yes. But neither of us is perfect. And I love her too much to let this or anything else come between us. Okay, good, because she loves you, too. I'm pretty sure she was working on her vows earlier. I reminded her like you asked me to. Thank you. That's good to know. Chase smiled. That had to be a good sign that Izzy was getting over her cold feet. As much as she tried to deny it, he knew she'd been feeling overwhelmed at the idea of marriage. Especially marriage to a well-known artist. It was a big lifestyle change for her, as she was already finding out with the paparazzi at her door. I think the bodyguard's here. Gracie exclaimed. Yep, he looks big and burly enough to be one. That's great. He should be able to get them off the property in no time. After a moment, she yelped in excitement. Wow, he's good. They're already leaving. Mama just shut the door. They're good and gone. I'm glad to hear that. Chase opened his eyes and stared up at the ceiling. It was time to come clean. Can I talk to your mom, please? Sure thing. Here she is. Thanks again for your help, Gracie added before handing the phone off. Chase. His heart clenched to hear Izzy's trembling voice. Baby, are you all right? They didn't hurt you, did they? No, I'm fine. Just riled up, but no harm done. Thank you for calling for backup. I don't know how long they would have stuck around if the bodyguard hadn't shown up. I'm glad you're okay. Just to be on the safe side, I'll have John keep his guy around for a while. I wouldn't put it past the Paps to come back later and try again. Do you think they'll be back? It's their job, Izzy. They're trying to earn a living, just like everyone else. She sighed loudly. I wish they'd find a better cause to apply all that enthusiasm to. I just don't understand how they knew to come here. How did they find me? And how did they know we're getting married? It was Chase's turn to sigh. I'm afraid that's my fault. Your fault? What do you mean? I may have let it slip during my interview yesterday that I'm engaged. Why would you do that? I was trying to explain why I'm postponing my European tour. But that wasn't the only reason, Izzy. He poured out his heart, hoping she would see his good intentions. I want everyone to know I found the woman I want to marry. I want the Paps to stop their rumors once and for all. My fans deserve to know the truth, too. They've been with me from day one, supporting me in my music and watching me essentially grow up before their eyes. I wanted to share this part of myself with them. It's important to me that people know there's a real person who inspires the songs I sing. I don't know if this makes any sense to you, Izzy, but it's how I feel. Please understand. There was a long pause that grew more uncomfortable by the second. When Izzy finally spoke, her tone was curt. I wasn't prepared at all for this, Chase. How could you do this without consulting me first? He sat up in his bed, head in his hands. There wasn't much he could say to undo the damage he'd already caused, but he would try. I'm sorry, Izzy. You're right, I should have talked to you before I said anything. I honestly had no idea that things would blow up like this so quickly. I didn't mention your name or give any information that would have led them to you. I promise you, I would never do anything to put you at risk. I have no idea how they found you. But they did, Chase. What am I supposed to do now? What if the paparazzi follow me to the store or to the dry cleaners or the coffee shop? What am I supposed to say? I don't know how long I can keep denying our relationship. Chase winced. Hearing those words from Izzy's own mouth wounded him deeply. Maybe she ought to return her engagement ring, because it sure didn't sound like she wanted to marry him. I have to be honest here. It hurts to hear you say that. Why would you want to deny being my fiancé? I'm just not ready. Are you having second thoughts about marrying me? No, Chase, that's not it at all. He was beyond listening or reasoning now. A question lay on the tip of his tongue, waiting to leap forward. Even though he knew the accusation was absurd, he asked it anyway. Would you rather be with Wade? Is that why you didn't tell me he was still at the house?
Chapter 9. Izzy. I don't understand why you lied to me, Izzy. Chase's accusation rang loud and clear in her ear. Izzy's heart sank to hear him so distraught. She had to admit, between the two of them, she was definitely more at fault. All Chase had wanted to do was share the good news about their engagement. His excitement may have prompted him to speak too soon, but he hadn't done so with bad intentions. In fact, he wanted to clear the air and dispel the rumors going around on social media. She, on the other hand, had chosen the complete opposite route. She'd been operating the only way she knew how, the way she'd been so used to dealing with problems, on her own. But she wasn't alone anymore. She was part of something bigger than herself, and she needed to start thinking and making decisions with Chase in mind. I'm so sorry, Chase. You have every right to be mad. Izzy's voice broke with regret. She slumped against the kitchen counter where she was standing, her head hung low. I should never have kept it from you. So, he stated with hesitation, there is something going on between you two. She jerked her head up, shaking it adamantly. Oh goodness, no. When I said you ought to be mad, I didn't mean mad as in crazy. Because that is crazy thinking. Why would you say such a thing? It's just that you were being so secretive about our engagement. You even took off your ring. I explained that to you. She lowered her voice in case Wade and Gracie hadn't left for the market yet. I didn't want him to take advantage of your financial situation. Okay, you did say that, he conceded. But you mean our financial situation, don't you? What's mine is yours. You know that, right? A lump formed in Izzy's throat. With the sleeve of her wool sweater, she wiped away a tear from the corner of her eye. Chase's words gave her the reassurance she needed. He was fully committed, financially and, most of all, emotionally. She had no doubt where he stood. Yes, I do. I feel the same way, too. We're in this together. Thanks. I really needed to hear that. He paused, then cleared his throat. I have to ask though. Why do you let Wade call you Bella? You didn't want me to use that nickname, but it's okay for him to. Chase's comment was so absurd, Izzy almost laughed out loud. She could understand how he may have read the situation wrong. No, Chase, most definitely not. I've told him over and over again not to call me that. I just mentioned it earlier today, in fact. Gracie can vouch for me, she was there. I believe you, Izzy. I just wondered if that was a special name he gave you when you were dating. No, it wasn't. It was the name my dad called me. Oh, I had no idea. Izzy swallowed past the lump growing in her throat. I miss him so much, it still hurts to talk about him. After he passed away, it never felt right for anyone else to use that nickname. And just to be clear, it irked me every time Wade tried to call me that, both in the past and now. If it weren't for Gracie, I'd have put him out on the street days ago. She sighed. What a mess she'd gotten herself into. She should have told Chase the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the treatment center being full. I didn't want you to worry. I thought it'd be better if I handled things on my own. But I know better now. We're a team, and teammates don't keep secrets. I've just been so used to carrying everything on my own shoulders, I forgot I could ask you for help. Even when you're half a world away, she added with chagrin. Oh baby, you don't know how happy I am to hear you say this. The relief in Chase's voice was palpable. I only wish I were there with you right now. I can't seem to think straight when we're apart. I assumed the worst and jumped to conclusions. I don't know how I could have thought what I did. She chuckled. Maybe jealousy had something to do with it. Jealousy? No way. Okay, fine, yes. Maybe a little. Chase sighed. But it's only because you're the best thing to happen to me. Being on tour makes me miss you all the more. It gets really lonely at times. Even though my band and crew are amazing and supportive, they're not you. They don't know me like you know me. Oh Chase. Hot tears welled in Izzy's eyes, causing the wreath hanging over the sink to blur. After being on her own for so many years, she understood loneliness well. The thought of Chase feeling alone broke her heart. I didn't know you felt that way. I thought you enjoyed traveling and being on the road. I do. I'm grateful I get to do what I love. But it would mean so much more to be able to do it with the one I love. You don't know how many times I've wished you were on stage with me singing our songs together. Can you imagine how awesome that would be? Her mouth grew dry just thinking it. Being surrounded by all the bright lights and thousands of faces staring at her, it was enough to make her want to crawl under her covers and hide. But there was such hope in Chase's words, she couldn't bear to disappoint him. What if I stayed backstage and watched you sing from there? Would that still be awesome? Backstage? What are you saying, Izzy? Do you want to come on tour with me? A grin spread across her face. Chase sounded so excited, like a little boy opening presents on Christmas Day. Maybe. Maybe. Okay, yes. I was thinking that I could come to Europe with you and we could have our honeymoon there. That way you wouldn't have to postpone your tour dates. Seriously? Chase whooped in delight. You're not joking, right? Of course I'm serious. As serious as I am about you, Chase Lockhart. But what about staying under the radar? The Paps would definitely find out about us if you came with me. Are you okay with that? Your life may never be the same again. She considered his warning for a moment, but only for a brief one. The truth was, her life hadn't been the same since last October when a tall, passionate guy came looking for a place to stay at her inn. Chase had turned her world upside down, but also right side up. He helped her believe in herself, in achieving her dreams, and most of all in love. Her life was already not what it used to be, it was 1,000 times better. All because of Chase. She couldn't deny their relationship any longer. She didn't want to. Yes, I'm sure, she declared. No more hiding. I want the whole world to know I love you. I'm so proud of you, and I'm proud to be with you. Izzy, Chase seemed to be at a loss for words. Thank you. I love you so much, too. Her body warmed as she pictured his gorgeous blue eyes and sweet smile. If she could focus on him and tune everything else out, she'd be okay. but she'd need his help. Will you do me a favor? Remind me not to read the tabloids. I don't want to know about all the times we'll be breaking up. Breaking up? Yeah. Like when you leave me for someone else. Someone much hotter and younger than me, she added with a droll laugh. Izzy baby, that will never happen. How do you know? Because there is no woman hotter than you. Younger maybe, but no one hotter. She let out a giggle. You are so good for my ego, Chase. As they continued to talk, Izzy glanced out the window overlooking the kitchen sink. The rain had finally stopped. A sliver of light broke through the dark clouds above. It comforted her to know that the same sun shining down on romance also shone on Chase, regardless of where he was. Thousands of miles had separated them many times this past year, as they did now, but Chase always found his way back to her. It was as if their town's legacy was his anchor, pulling him home. Or more specifically, their love was the anchor. And in that moment, she knew everything would work out. She just needed him to come home in time for their wedding.
Chapter 10. Chase. Scream your heads off for one of the hottest guys on the planet, Chase Lockhart. Chase took his cue from the MC's introduction and headed toward the stage. His guitar tech stood in the wings, holding his prized guitar out for him. Chase went through the familiar motions of slipping the strap over his head before he rolled his head from side to side and bounced on his heels. Releasing a deep breath, he walked onto center stage to greet the biggest audience, of over 14,000 people, he'd ever performed for. The band began playing the intro to his latest single, an upbeat song with a heavy drum beat. Spotlights shone on the stage, moving in time to the music's rhythm. The indoor auditorium was dark except for the rectangular beams of light coming from the crowd's cell phone screens. Chase made out the faces of his female fans screaming near the stage as they stood shoulder to shoulder. The excitement in the indoor stadium was so tangible, it seemed to buzz and crackle like electricity in the air. Chase stepped up to the mic and yelled out, "Hello Brisbane. Sing along if you know it." He began strumming along with the band on his guitar, eager to start the show. As he sang, a surge of adrenaline coursed through his entire body. He couldn't help the grin lighting up his face. Aside from being with Izzy, there was nothing he loved more than singing. Tonight was his final performance in Australia. His visit abroad had gone by in a flash, well, the second half a lot faster than the first. Ever since he and Izzy had had their heart-to-heart over the phone, he'd been feeling more positive and less alone. Knowing that the woman he loved supported him enough to make their relationship known to the world boosted his confidence. He'd already shared the news of their engagement during his concerts this past week, as well as during a couple of interviews. He still had yet to mention Izzy's name or tell any identifying details about her, but the time would come. They had agreed to make a formal announcement after the wedding so as not to disrupt their big day. Only 4 more days to go. Chase couldn't wait. Nothing could compare to marrying his first love and best friend. He was already packed and ready to take the first flight back to America tomorrow morning. There was so much to do once he got back in romance, from his final tux fitting to taking Izzy to watch her favorite community production of A Christmas Carol. The most crucial item on his to-do list. He needed to see about getting Wade out of the inn. He'd already had his assistant call around to every single treatment center in Oregon. As soon as a space opened up, he'd drive Wade over himself. Or better yet, he'd put the guy up in a hotel a few towns over and hire someone to keep an eye on him. Anything to keep Wade from adding any more stress to Izzy's life. He'd have already done so if Izzy had let him. She was too stubborn for her own good, insisting that Wade be allowed to stay at the inn for Gracie's sake. Of all the things he loved about Izzy, her strong will was high on the list. Oh, it made for some interesting discussions, but he wouldn't change her for the world. Her fiery personality was the perfect complement to the red highlights in her hair, which he loved. Every part of her, inside and out, was beautiful. He couldn't wait to hold her soft curves and kiss her again. With or without mistletoe, he was going to shower her with enough kisses to help her forget their time apart. He continued singing, moving effortlessly from one song to the next as he practiced in rehearsal. The audience sang along and chanted his name in between songs. He was enjoying the evening so much, he forgot for a moment how much he missed home. Halfway through the concert, however, his throat burned with exhaustion. Chase stopped to take a drink from a water bottle on the stage and wipe beads of sweat from his forehead. Second by second, his entire body began to ache. He paused to lean on the mic stand for a moment. The brief respite helped a little. He sipped some more water and took a deep breath. Just 30 minutes and 5 more songs to go. As he picked up his guitar to play another song, his phone began to vibrate. He quickly plucked it out of the back pocket of his jeans. The only calls allowed to come through when it was on silent mode were from Izzy. Sure enough, her name and photo flashed across the screen. What was she doing calling in the middle of the night? Sorry guys. Please give me a minute, Chase announced to the crowd before turning away from the mic. He answered the phone with an anxious hello. Izzy baby, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Chase. I'm fine. Relief washed over him to hear her warm, familiar voice. Oh, thank goodness. Why aren't you sleeping? Isn't it the middle of the night there? It is, which is how I know you're in the middle of a concert right now, she began, her tone hesitant. You said you'd pick up any time I called, so here I am. Here you are. He chuckled. It's great to hear your voice. But why are you still awake? I was thinking about what you said the other week, about wanting me to join you on stage sometime. This doesn't really count, but it's the closest I can get until I go on tour with you next year. Not that I'll for sure be performing with you, she rushed on to add. I'll need to think about that some more and work up the courage. But for now, this'll have to do. He blinked in surprise. This is your way of joining me on stage? It is. Izzy laughed. You don't mind, do you? Not at all. This is very sweet of you. Thank you for calling. Just hearing Izzy's voice eased the aches and pains in his body. To think that she was sacrificing her sleep and stepping out of her comfort zone for him blew his mind. He was a lucky, lucky man. Lifting his head, Chase looked out at the sea of faces as they waited anxiously for him. He smiled as an idea came to him. Would you mind meeting my fans? Can I introduce you to them? Sure. Her answer came out more as a question. After a moment, she repeated herself with more confidence. Sure, it's okay. Yes. They're going to love you, Izzy. Hold on a sec. Let me put you on speakerphone. Are you ready for this? Izzy paused before answering with an enthusiastic yes. Let's do it. Chase stepped back up to the mic and called out to the crowd, I apologize for the delay, everyone. But I think you'll be happy when I tell you why I had to take a call in the middle of the concert. He held up his cell phone for everyone to see. As some of you may have heard, I'm no longer single. I'm actually engaged to the most wonderful woman. Cheers of excitement, along with some high-pitched screams, filled the entire auditorium. The response was so loud, it was almost deafening. Chase waited for the crowd to calm down before continuing. She called me in the middle of the night, her time to show her support for me. Isn't she amazing? Would you all like to say hi to her? A resounding yes echoed through the place and everyone in the crowd raised their hands. Great! I hope you'll show her some love. Chase held his phone up before the crowd and waved it in the air. The applause and screams that followed was the loudest response he'd ever heard. Joy flooded his heart as he listened to the collective voices calling out to Izzy. His fans were the most loyal and caring fans an artist could hope for. He lowered his phone and held it up to his ear again. Do you hear them, baby? They love you. It's so loud, Chase. I can't believe how loud they are. And they're all cheering for you. He grinned. Do you want to say hi back? Sure. Okay, let me hold you up to the mic. He motioned for the audience to listen up. When the screaming died down, he spoke into the mic, you sound awesome. Thank you guys. She'd like to say hi to you, too, now. Hi Brisbane. Izzy called out through the phone. Thank you for the warm hello. A roar went up again in the auditorium. Gratitude filled Chase as he stared out at the crowd. The moment was perfect. He and Izzy were sharing their first stage together. The audience was the most supportive, and loudest, he'd ever experienced. The evening had been great, but now it was even better. Except for the sharp pain in his throat that had returned in full force. A wave of fatigue suddenly washed over him, weakening his entire body. He reached out to hold onto the mic stand to stay upright. Something was wrong. He wondered if he was finally succumbing to the flu that had been going around his crew. Before he could think through his symptoms, his legs gave way. He fell, fast. The last thing he saw before he closed his eyes was his phone crashing to the ground beside him.
Chapter 11. Izzy. Miss Sutton, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Izzy clutched her phone so tightly in her hands, it felt like the piece of metal might break in two. The last sound she'd heard come over the phone line was a loud, collective gasp. After that, it had been chaos for minutes as the fans screamed Chase's name. She had no idea what had happened, but she imagined it was not good. Her pulse pounded so loudly, she heard the rushing sound of blood in her ears. She inhaled quickly, trying to catch her breath. Where's Chase? Someone please tell me what's going on. He fainted, ma'am. The male voice answering her was low and hoarse. The man sneezed once before he continued, this is John, his bodyguard. He's come to, but we're taking him to the hospital just to be on the safe side. The paramedics are here now. Fainted? I don't understand. He was fine a few minutes ago. Izzy threw off her thick comforter and slipped her feet into the fuzzy Mrs. Claus slippers Chase had given her last Christmas. She began pacing back and forth across her bedroom floor, her feet moving at a frantic pace. She felt so helpless, half a world away from the man she loved. John, is he okay? Can I talk to him? Not yet, ma'am. They're loading him onto the ambulance. Don't worry, I'll be going with him. I gotta go now. Wait. Silence fell on the other end, leaving Izzy more distraught. She immediately dialed Chase's number again but only reached his voicemail. After several more unsuccessful attempts, she sank onto her bed in despair. She glanced at the clock on her bedside table. 2:37. That made it 8:37, Australian time. Surely, there had to be reporters still working at this time of the evening over there. Someone who might even be at Chase's concert and had seen what had happened. Izzy pulled up the web browser on her phone and did a search for Chase's name. Immediately, a dozen headlines popped up. Singer Chase Lockhart faints at Brisbane concert. Heartthrob Chase Lockhart rushed to hospital. Pop star Chase Lockhart deathly ill. She choked back a sob when she read the last line. No, it couldn't be true. John had just said Chase was fine. Her mind told her not to believe everything she read, but her heart, so heavy with worry, didn't want to listen to reason. Izzy feared the worst. In that moment, all her other concerns fled her mind. She didn't care that the DJ had double booked and would no longer be able to play at their reception. She could care less that the programs had come back with a typo, exchange of bows, instead of vows, and needed to be reprinted again. It didn't even faze her that Wade was still stuck at the inn. All she could think about was that the man she loved was 8,158 miles away lying in a hospital bed, alone. Izzy stopped in her tracks and made up her mind. She needed to get on the next flight to Australia. She had to see with her own eyes that Chase was okay. Before she could start looking for airfare, there was a firm knock on her bedroom door. "Mama," Gracie called out. "Are you awake?" Izzy rushed to open the door and found her daughter standing there in her pink cotton pajamas and bare feet. Thor pushed past her until he reached Izzy's side, tail wagging in the air. "Sweetheart, what are you doing up? There's something you need to know." Despite the late hour, Gracie's eyes were open wide and alert. She held up her cell phone in one hand and gave it to Izzy. "It's a reporter. He says Chase is sick." "A reporter?" Izzy took the phone and held it up to her ear. "Hello? Who am I speaking with?" "This is Harry, I'm with TZM News." "Am I talking to Chase Lockhart's fiancée?" "Yes, this is she." "Do you know what happened to Chase?" "I just got word from my associate in Brisbane that he fainted during his concert." "Do you know where they've taken him? What's his current condition?" "I don't know." "How much can you tell me about the state of his health? Has he ever fainted before?" "No, not that I know of." "Well, there was one time when Thor knocked him over, but..." She stopped herself short. Why was this man questioning her? And why was she saying so much? She could hardly think straight in her state of mind. "Wait a second, Harry. I don't like how you're shooting all these questions at me. This is already a very stressful time, and you're making it worse. And I do not appreciate you calling me in the middle of the night. You woke up half the house." "I'm just doing my job, ma'am. I chase the stories as they happen, and this time it so happens I'm chasing Chase." He snickered at his own joke. "Now, do you know if your fiancé has been under the influence of any illegal substances? I'm willing to bet he fainted because, hey." Izzy cut in. Heat rushed into her cheeks. Anger replaced the fear she'd had, and it was all directed at this no-good reporter. She placed a hand on her hip and growled into the phone, "What did you say your name was?" "It's Harry." "Harry." Izzy kept her voice low and steady as she drawled out his name. "Does your mother know what you do?" "My mother." "Why does that matter?" "Of course it matters what your mother thinks. It would break my heart to know my child was making money spewing lies for a living. Because that's what you and all these tabloid sites are doing, preying on innocent folks and dragging their names through the mud." Izzy shot Gracie a look of annoyance as she gestured at the phone. Her daughter raised her eyebrows and gave her a thumbs up. Now listen up, Harry. You are not to write anything about Chase Lockhart unless you hear it from a reliable source and you have proof to back it up. Harry scoffed loudly. Lady, this is my job, and I'll do it how I like. I'm already going an extra mile by calling you up. I figured you're the best, most reliable source there is. You're marrying the guy, aren't you? He had a point. She was about the best source he could find. But under these circumstances, even she didn't know what was going on. Izzy gritted her teeth. Why had she been wasting her time and breath on this reporter when she should have been trying to find out more about Chase? She rolled her eyes in frustration until an idea popped into her mind. Harry, now listen up. I think we can help each other out. You said you know someone in Australia. Can you reach out to them and find out which hospital Chase is at? You do this for me, and I'll give you an interview. Harry whistled in excitement. You'll do an exclusive interview with me? If you promise to write the truth, and only the truth. He scoffed. All right, deal. Let me make some calls and get back to you. Izzy released a grateful sigh. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, he remarked genuinely. This is way better than the deal I had with the other guy. The other guy? What are you talking about, Harry? The one who called me up using this number. It was about a week or two ago. He wanted to give me the dirt on your and Chase's engagement, for a fee of course, he added drolly. I thought we'd worked out a deal, but then he called back and said he'd gotten a better offer from my competition. Izzy's jaw dropped. She ended the call as adrenaline surged through her in a large wave, propelling her quickly down the hall. Gracie called out, asking where she was going. Thor trotted ahead of her, his nails clicking on the hardwood floor, as if he knew the destination. Perhaps he'd been trying to tell Izzy who the culprit was for a while now. Because he'd been barking a lot more than usual, particularly when he saw the guest Izzy had graciously allowed to stay at her home. Well, no more. Wade had definitely overstayed his welcome. Regardless of his role in Gracie's life, Izzy had had enough. He could still be a father to Gracie, just not under the same roof. Chase's and her roof. Because this home belonged to them both. And anyone who would undermine their relationship was not welcome here. She knocked on the door, ready to tell Wade exactly what she thought of him. Okay, maybe not everything. She didn't want to stoop to his level, especially with Gracie standing beside her. But she would do what she should have done a long time ago. Stop letting the baggage from her past dictate her future. The door swung open, and Wade emerged in a shirt and sweatpants, his hair disheveled. His lips curved up in his telltale smirk as he looked Izzy up and down. Did you miss me, Bella? Izzy balked, hands clenched into tight fists. Thor seemed to sense the tension because he looked up at her, as if waiting for her signal to attack. As much as Wade needed some sense knocked into him, unleashing Thor on him would be cruel. So Izzy bit her tongue, reminding herself that Wade may be a dozen distasteful things she couldn't say out loud, but he had given her the best gift of her life. She would take Gracie's name to heart and show her ex some undeserved favor. Wade, I need you to listen up, and listen well. The only thing I miss is my sanity. I was willing to put up with your stinkin' attitude for our daughter's sake, but I realize now I've been doing her a great disservice, letting you treat me the way you do. No woman, least of all our daughter, should be disrespected. Don't you agree? He stammered, of course. I also do not appreciate you selling our personal information to the tabloids. I know it was you who brought that reporter here the other week to ask about Chase and me. Gracie stepped in between her parents, distress etched in the lines on her forehead. Dad, why would you do something like that? After all that Mama's done for you. I thought better of you. Wade's brows shot up as Gracie's words sunk in. For once in his life, he seemed at a loss for words. I didn't mean any harm, sweetheart. I saw a business opportunity, and I went for it. I just needed the money. The disappointment on Gracie's face broke Izzy's heart. She reached for her hand and squeezed it. She then took a deep breath and looked Wade in the eye. Your actions did do more harm than good, Wade. It's high time you started thinking about someone other than yourself. I won't have you coming around here until you do. First thing in the morning, I'll be calling for a taxi to take you to a hotel. I'll pay for your stay until you start treatment. After that, you're on your own. Remorse clouded Wade's face, darkening his blue eyes. He hung his head and nodded. I understand. I'll pack up my stuff. Gracie tugged on Izzy's hand and gave her a pleading look. Mama, Dad doesn't have to take a taxi. I'll drive him tomorrow. Before Izzy could respond, Wade spoke up. Thank you, Gracie, but it's better that I fend for myself. I'll take the bus. He paused to rub the stubble along his chin, a thoughtful look on his face. I probably don't say it enough, but I do appreciate all you've done for me, Izzy. Chase is a lucky man. Izzy bit back a smile. Under any other circumstances, she would have allowed herself to celebrate this personal victory, but she had more important things on her mind. Her number one priority was to locate Chase and make sure he was okay.
Chapter 12. Chase. Chase, please wake up. Chase struggled to open his eyes. His entire body ached as he lay under a scratchy blanket. He could hardly think straight, his head was so stuffy. The last time he'd felt this weak was after Thor had mistaken him for someone else and knocked the wind out of him. The same sweet voice he'd woken up to then was the same one calling out to him now. Izzy. Was she here? His surroundings came into focus as he blinked a few times. The stark white walls of a hospital room surrounded him. There was an .4 in his hand that was hooked up to a bag of clear liquid hanging on a stand beside the bed. And the beautiful face of his fiancée was greeting him from his cell phone screen, which his bodyguard, John, held up for him. John snorted, a big smile appearing on his face. I see how it is. You won't wake up for me, but one word from Miss Sutton, and you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He turned the phone toward himself for a second. Chase may be America's favorite pop star, but you're the one with the voice of an angel, ma'am. He handed the phone to Chase and patted him on the shoulder. I'll be back to check on you later, kid, he added before leaving the room. Too tired to hold the phone up, Chase turned onto his side and propped his phone against a pillow next to him. Despite how horrible he felt, he couldn't help grinning at the sight of Izzy's face. She had her hair pulled back in a ponytail, revealing the slender curve of her neck. Without any makeup on, she looked young and fresh, except for the worry line between her brows. Chase, you scared me. How are you? How do you feel? His throat was so raw, he had to swallow a few times before he could manage a word. Like I got hit by a bus. What happened? Izzy's eyes grew wide with concern. You don't remember? You fainted during your concert. I was on the phone with you when it happened. Her answer triggered a sequence of memories to rush through his mind. Brisbane. The packed auditorium. Izzy calling him mid-concert. The exhaustion in his whole body. He grimaced, recalling the impact of the hard ground. He had sure ended his tour with a bang. I remember now. I didn't finish the concert. No, you didn't. But that's beside the point. But my fans, I let them down. I have to make it up to them. Chase Lockhart. Izzy balked. Performing is the last thing you should be thinking about. You need to take care of yourself. The doctor said you must have been terribly worn out to get such a bad case of the flu. Did you not take the vitamins I packed for you? I did, every day like I promised. Then you probably didn't sleep enough. Chase chuckled softly. He loved how Izzy's cheeks flushed bright pink when she got worked up. Probably not. Her hazel eyes narrowed at him with disapproval. You know you need to rest more when you're touring. It takes a lot out of you. Why didn't you take care of yourself? It's hard to sleep when I'm jet-lagged. He'd also been finishing up a new song for their wedding, but he kept that reason to himself. Plus, I missed you so much, he added with an exaggerated pout, in hopes that she wouldn't get too much more upset. She appeared to be on the verge of crying. I'm sorry I worried you. His apology tipped her over the edge, causing tears to fall down her face. She clasped one hand over her mouth and choked back her sobs. I didn't know where you were, Chase. John didn't answer his phone for the longest time, and all the tabloids made it sound like you were on your deathbed. Izzy baby, he cut in, I'm fine. A little tired, but I'm in one piece. Nothing in the world could stop me from coming home to marry you. As the words left his mouth, he frowned. He hoped it wasn't morning yet. He had a flight to catch, one he couldn't miss. What time is it? Izzy sniffled as she composed herself. Time. It's a little after midnight. Your time or mine? Mine. Why? Chase furrowed his brows, trying to process the information, despite the pounding in his head. That meant it was 6 p.m. Australian time. The concert had been later than that, which meant, unless he'd had the ability to go back in time, it was already the next day. Had he slept for almost 24 hours straight? But if it was December 21st, that meant, the wedding. Our wedding's in 3 days. I need to get home. Chase, calm down. Relax. Izzy's words froze him in place, even though in reality he was too tired to move a muscle. For once, she was trying to comfort him, not the other way around. Funny how the tables had turned. How are you so calm? We can't get married when I'm halfway around the world. It's okay, Chase. I just want you to get better. Nothing else matters right now except for you getting better. She gave him a small smile. I'd give anything to be there with you. I had a flight booked, but the doctor said it'd be best if I stayed put so you could get some rest. He also didn't think it was a good idea for me to be exposed to your bug. I tried to convince him I didn't care. I already agreed to marry you for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, and I'm more than ready to start fulfilling those vows. But, she sighed, doctor's orders. So you have to stay put until he clears you to fly home. But the wedding, what if I don't make it home in time? She bit her bottom lip as she shrugged. Then we'll just pick another date. Or we'll elope. I don't need a fancy wedding, Chase. I just need you. The tenderness in her eyes moved him to tears. He traced a finger over her image on the screen, wishing he could touch her in person. And me, you. I can't wait to see you. She nodded, trying to appear brave, despite her trembling lower lip. You just focus on getting better, all right? I will, he promised. I'm already feeling better talking to you. John's right. You really do have the voice of an angel. Izzy scoffed. I think it's that flu bug talking. If you only knew what I've been up to these past couple of days. I had to deal with some not-so-angelic people. What do you mean? She filled him in on her showdown with the reporter as well as with Wade. Chase didn't know if he was more impressed or relieved with how Izzy handled both situations. He wished he'd been around to help her out, but he was pleased with how she'd stood up for herself, and for him. She really had his back. He felt even more confident that they would be starting their marriage on the right foot. I'm so proud of you, baby. Thank you for putting our relationship first. I still can't believe you agreed to an interview. Well, the reporter came through for me, so I need to keep my end of the deal. Izzy wrinkled her nose in chagrin. Do you think you could do it with me? I'd feel a lot better with you there. For sure. It'll be fun doing our first interview together as newlyweds. Newlyweds, I like the sound of that. She sighed, a wistful look on her face. I can't wait to marry you, Chase. Me, too. Trust me, I'm running out of this hospital and straight to the airport as soon as they give me the okay. I'm going to make it home to you, Izzy. I promise. With those words, Chase made up his mind to do whatever it took to get back to romance. He had the commitment of a lifetime to see to. It was one thing to disappoint his fans, but to let Izzy down. He wouldn't dream of it. Nothing was going to stop him from making it back home in time to marry her.
Chapter 13. Izzy. I'm sure Chase will make it back in time, Mama. Izzy glanced to her right at Gracie, who was sitting in the passenger seat of her car. She reached over and gave her hand a tight squeeze. How'd you know I was thinking about him? Gracie grinned. He's pretty much all you've been thinking about the past 2 days. Her daughter was right. Her mind had been overtaken with worry, for Chase's health, first and foremost, and also their wedding. Despite Chase's insistence that he'd be home in time, he still hadn't gotten the all-clear from his doctor when they'd texted last night. With just 26 hours until their wedding, the situation wasn't looking too good. This wasn't at all how Izzy had imagined celebrating the holidays. I should really get my mind off all the things that aren't going right and focus on something more positive. I'd hate for my bad attitude to spoil your and Brady's Christmas. Don't worry about us, Mama. We're just happy to be spending time together. Izzy smiled. That boy sure is a sweetheart to be giving up a warm Christmas for all this rain. She flipped her car's wipers to a faster setting as the rain began to pound the windshield. They had just dropped Brady, who had flown in from LA yesterday, off at Sweet Retreat, a local beauty product shop. He was likely buying a Christmas gift for Gracie and not shaving gel, as he'd insisted with bright pink cheeks. Izzy had played along and not made a big deal about his request to shop alone. I guess both of our California guys will do anything for love, she joked as she forced a laugh for her daughter's sake. Especially yours, Mama. Gracie's tone was light and cheerful, a welcome contrast to the dreary weather. She pointed out Izzy's window at the Esmeralda Theater as they drove down Douglas Road. Do you want to catch a movie tonight? Maybe it'll help get your mind off things. They're showing The Man Who Came to Dinner. Izzy scoffed under her breath. If only those words were real and described her life. She'd give anything to have Chase home tonight. She even planned on making his favorite meal, breakfast for dinner, on the off chance he showed up. A part of her wanted to believe miracles were possible, especially at Christmas time. Valentine's Day may be the most celebrated holiday in romance, but their town was known for bringing people together any time of the year. But if Chase hadn't gotten on a plane by now, the chances were slim to none that he'd be back today. That's why she had already canceled the rehearsal they had scheduled for that evening. "Why don't you and Brady go?" "I'm not really in the mood to watch anything." Gracie wrinkled her nose as she turned to face Izzy. "I would have suggested what they're showing tomorrow, but I think you're already living the movie in real life." "What do you mean? What are they showing tomorrow?" "Scrooge." She cracked up with a wide grin that lit up her blue eyes. Izzy shot Gracie a wry smile. "Very funny. I don't hate Christmas." "Maybe not, but you're awfully grumpy for someone about to marry the love of her life." Sighing, Izzy stepped on the brakes as the truck in front of hers came to a rest. There were more cars than usual on the road, with everyone out doing last-minute shopping. "I'm being realistic, Gracie. I don't know if the wedding's going to happen tomorrow." "It'll happen, Mama. Trust me." She eyed her daughter suspiciously. Gracie sounded too sure to just be saying that to make her feel better. "Do you know something I don't?" Gracie bit her lower lip and looked out her passenger window. "Don't you just love how the gazebo looks? The Christmas tree is so beautiful. I wish I'd been able to come home for the lighting ceremony and hear Chase perform that day." Izzy quirked a brow. Sure, the white lights and red ribbons on the 30-foot Nobel fir were pretty to look at, but a tree was still a tree. "Gracie, I know you well enough to know you're avoiding answering my question." Gracie groaned and finally turned to meet Izzy's gaze. Her cheeks were almost the same shade of red as the scarf peeking out from her winter coat. "You know I can't lie to you, Mama. But I can't break a promise either. Please don't ask me anything more. Let's just leave it at that." The last thing Izzy wanted was to end the discussion, but she'd respect her daughter's wishes. "Okay, no more questions." Gracie nodded with relief. "Thanks. And like I said, you don't have to worry." Izzy took Gracie's words to heart as she followed the cars in front of her. The traffic inched forward, giving her hope that regardless of how slowly things seemed to be moving, they were still making progress. She and Chase would eventually get married, just not tomorrow. Since it was too late to cancel with their vendors, perhaps they could turn their wedding celebration into a Christmas Eve party for their guests. She'd talked to Chase about this when he called later today. At the next streetlight, Izzy made a left, then turned into the parking lot of Valley Market. She found a space close to the store and turned off the engine. She loved this little market for their fresh flowers as well as for the fond memory she had of meeting Chase here last fall. Seeing the store made her feel a little closer to him and eager to buy the bacon he loved so much. "Let's make a run for it," she said to Gracie as she grabbed an umbrella from the back seat. They exited the car and ran through several large puddles before reaching the automatic sliding door. Once inside, Izzy dropped the umbrella in a bucket near the entrance. She gestured to the back of the store. "I'm going to get some bacon and eggs." "What else should I get? Is there anything special that Brady likes to eat?" Gracie brushed her wet bangs off her face. "Honestly, he'll eat most anything. I don't know where he puts it all." Izzy chuckled. "That sounds like Chase. I'll grab an extra dozen eggs then. Would you mind getting some potatoes? We can't have breakfast without hash browns." Gracie took a second to answer. she seemed to be busy scanning the area. Her face brightened when she glanced over at the produce area. "You know what, Mama, I'll get the eggs. Why don't you get the potatoes? I never know which ones to pick," she added quickly as she turned to go. "Okay. Don't forget the bacon," Izzy called after her. She watched Gracie's petite form disappear as she turned down one of the middle aisles. She shook her head in wonder. Gracie had gone shopping with her enough times to know how to pick out any kind of fruit or vegetable. If this wasn't a sign of something suspicious, she didn't know what was. She didn't have time to ponder the situation further though because her phone rang. She plucked it out of her coat pocket and answered it as she walked toward the produce section. "Hello? Izzy baby, how are you?" "Chase." Warmth flooded her chest upon hearing his voice. "I'm good. How are you? You sound so energetic. Are you feeling better?" "I am. The medicine the doctor gave me finally kicked in. I slept really well last night." "Oh, that's so good to hear. Does that mean you'll be able to travel soon?" she asked hopefully. She reached the bin of potatoes and tore a plastic bag from the roll next to it. "I know it's too late now for you to get back for the wedding, but what about Christmas Day? I think that can be arranged. With the time difference, I can arrive in Romance the same day I leave Australia. It'll be like going back in time." "Exactly." With her phone tucked between her cheek and shoulder, Izzy began picking out potatoes and putting them into the bag. "That reminds me of the Ghost of Christmas Past, except this situation isn't nearly as sad and depressing." "Not at all." Chase chuckled then sobered up. "I'm sorry we missed seeing the production this year, Izzy. I'll make it up to you, I promise." "Don't worry about it, Chase. I'm just relieved you're feeling better." Izzy was more than relieved, she was ecstatic. The thought of Chase being home for Christmas brought a giddy smile to her face. She was sure anyone who saw her would wonder why she was so happy to be buying potatoes. Sure enough, the sound of footsteps caught Izzy's attention as someone approached. Maybe one of Romance's friendly residents wanted to make sure she wasn't losing her mind in the produce aisle. "Izzy, is that you?" Izzy raised her head to find a white-haired woman calling out to her. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Cooper, the woman who had played an important role in bringing her and Chase together. Wonder of wonders, the nosy but kind-hearted woman always seemed to be one step behind her, especially in this grocery store. Izzy murmured into the phone, "You'll never guess who's here." Chase's laughter came over the line. "Let me guess, our favorite neighbor." Mrs. Cooper looked at Izzy over the rim of her glasses. "Izzy dear, buying potatoes again?" "Hi Mrs. Cooper." "Yes, I am," she replied as she held up a spud. "It's been a while since I've seen you." "You forgot to add, through the kitchen window," Chase joked over the phone. His comment brought a grin to Izzy's face. She had to clear her throat to keep from laughing out loud. "You noticed, did you?" Mrs. Cooper flashed a toothy grin. "I've been cooped up inside with a nasty bug. This is my first trip out in over a week." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. It looks like you're on the mend though." "I am, thank you dear. Just in time to attend your and Chase's wedding tomorrow, oh." Izzy cut in with an apologetic smile. "I'm afraid the wedding's being postponed. You see, Chase fell ill and missed his flight back from Australia. He should be coming home in a couple of days though." Mrs. Cooper gave her a puzzled look as if she didn't quite believe her words. She narrowed her eyes as she shifted her attention to something behind Izzy. With a chuckle, she asked, "Then who is that I see there?" Izzy balked. Who in the world was Mrs. Cooper referring to? Maybe her vision was failing because there was no way Chase could be here, could he? She spun around and gasped. Next to the bin of apples stood a tall, dark-haired man with the most gorgeous blue eyes. He flashed her his magazine cover smile as soon as their gazes locked. Izzy's jaw dropped, along with her phone and the bag of potatoes she'd been holding. Goodness gracious! How, when? A tidal wave of joy washed over her, fast and strong. Heart racing, she ran to him and jumped into his open arms. The man she loved was home, and all was right with the world again.
Chapter 14. Chase. What are you doing here? Chase held Izzy tight to himself and buried his face in her hair. I told you nothing was going to stop me from coming home to you. She pulled away to look at him full in the eyes. With both hands, she ran her fingers over his cheeks, then his lips, as if to assure herself he was really there. But you said the doctor didn't clear you to fly. You were still in Australia when we texted. I may have let you believe I still was, Chase admitted with a sly smile. I wanted to surprise you. I hope you're not mad. Izzy shot him a pouty glare before slapping him gently on the arm. She stood up on her tiptoes and wrapped her arms around his neck. Tears glistened in her eyes as she shook her head. I could never be mad at you, Chase Lockhart. Are you sure? Because I remember distinctly you being upset with me the other week. He chuckled. Or maybe my memories are fuzzy from being sick. She pursed her lips as she pretended to think. Okay, I could never be that mad at you. Good. That means we'll have many happy years together as husband and wife. He cupped her face as he gazed lovingly at her. Oh, how he had missed Izzy's gorgeous face. The vulnerability in her hazel eyes, the unabashed joy in her smile, and how the tip of her nose turned pink when she was overcome with emotion. His breath caught in his throat as he murmured, "You're even more beautiful than when I first laid eyes on you in this store a year ago." She quirked a brow, humor lighting up her eyes. You're laying it on thick. You did hear I'm not mad at you, right? Yes, I did. He smiled. Which is why you should know every word of what I said is true. You are beautiful inside and out, Izzy. I'm the luckiest man in the world to be marrying you. Oh, Chase, Izzy's eyes welled up immediately. Her lower lip quivered as her tears began to fall, even as she smiled. I'm crying like a fool, but it's because I'm happy. You make me so happy. With a yearning bottled up from their 2 weeks apart, he captured Izzy's mouth with his. She gasped softly as he pulled her flush against him. His fever may have broken a day ago, but his body felt like it was on fire. He couldn't get enough of this woman. There was nowhere he wanted to be than here, kissing Izzy as if his next breath depended on it. And he would have continued kissing her if it weren't for the applause filling the air. Izzy pulled back first and began laughing. A small crowd had gathered around them in the produce section, hooting and whistling their approval. Leading the charge was good old Mrs. Cooper, who was proudly telling everyone about her role as their matchmaker. Off to one side stood Gracie with a wide grin and tears streaming down her face. She broke off from the crowd and ran toward them. Chase, you made it. She gave him a quick hug before turning to Izzy. Were you surprised, Mama? I can't believe I almost gave it away. It was so hard keeping Chase's return a secret from you. That explains why you were acting so strangely. Izzy laughed and pulled Gracie in for a hug. I was surprised. This is the best Christmas present I could have wished for. Thank you for your help, Gracie. Chase held up his hand for a high five. Everything worked out even better than I'd planned. He waved to everyone standing around them and nodded in appreciation. Thanks, everyone. It's good to be home. We hope you'll come out to our wedding tomorrow. 5 p.m. at the Donaldson house. No invitation needed, just come for a good time. Izzy flashed him a curious look, but there was no time for her to ask questions. The other shoppers immediately walked over to congratulate them. With an arm around Izzy, Chase greeted each person and shook their hand. The interaction reminded him of when he met his fans on tour, but with a lot less squealing and zero requests for selfies. These people supported him and Izzy because they believed in what their small town stood for: romance. Everyone here rooted for happy endings, and his and Izzy's was truly happy indeed. After the crowd had dispersed, Izzy turned to him with wide eyes. Did you just invite half the town to our wedding, Chase Lockhart? What, 10, 12 people? I'd hardly call that half the town. It will be when those dozen or so people tell their neighbors and those people tell their neighbors' sisters' uncle's cat. Gracie nodded knowingly beside them. You did say no invitation required, Chase. I did, didn't I? Chase ran a hand through his hair as he took in Izzy's and Gracie's amused grins. Can you blame me? Everyone was so supportive and happy for us. I thought it'd be nice for them to join us on our big day. Well, our big day just got a lot bigger, Izzy quipped. I better call the caterer and the bakery and ask if they can double our orders. Good idea. Thanks, baby. Chase released a deep breath as he checked his watch. If you don't mind, I need to pick up my mom and brother from their hotel for the rehearsal. Izzy gasped. I canceled the rehearsal, Chase. And I thought you told your mom and brother the wedding was postponed. Well, I may have uncancelled the rehearsal. And also let you believe I told them not to come. Chase Lockhart. What other things have you been keeping from me? Chase bit back a smile. He couldn't wait for Izzy to discover all the other plans he had for tomorrow. That, my love, is for me to know and for you to find out. Right now, we have a wedding to prepare for. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Chase was more than ready to marry the woman of his dreams.
Chapter 15. Izzy. Mama, you look so beautiful. Izzy turned to see Gracie standing in the doorway to her bedroom, a bright smile curving her lips. She wore her bridesmaid gown, a knee-length dress in a shimmery shade of red that reminded Izzy what a special day today was. Not that she needed any reminding. But seeing Gracie dressed up gave her the assurance that her and Chase's wedding day had finally arrived. For that, she was so grateful and relieved. You look lovely, too, sweetheart. Gracie walked over and sat beside Izzy on the bed. Despite the joy on her face, her eyes glistened with a wet sheen. I don't know how you're keeping it all together. I sure hope I can make it down the aisle in one piece. She laughed and wrapped Gracie in a warm embrace. Don't you worry. I'm sure there will be plenty of tears later during the ceremony. Especially when I say my vows, she added with chagrin. Check with me afterward when my mascara's running and I look like a raccoon. Chase may have second thoughts about marrying me then. Never, Mama, Gracie insisted with a firm shake of her head. You should have seen him this morning. He was so excited, he couldn't stop smiling. Brady joked he might have gotten a cavity or two from being around Chase. Really? That's so sweet. Joy welled up in Izzy, causing her throat to constrict. She took a deep breath to compose herself. If you're trying to make me cry now, Gracie, it's working. Wait until he sees you, Mama. I'm blown away by how beautiful you look, and you don't even have your dress on yet. Izzy glanced at her reflection in the mirror across from the bed. She was impressed with her appearance as well. While Chase and Brady had gone out to do some last-minute errands, she'd spent the better part of the morning having her hair and makeup done. Chase had arranged for a professional stylist to come over and give her the red carpet treatment. Her hair had been curled, then brushed out and pinned up in an elegant updo. The stylist had given her smoky eyes and painted her lips with the brightest shade of red she'd ever worn. For a small-town gal, she felt completely out of her element, but also amazingly glamorous, with a capital G. This was only one of the surprises Chase had set up in advance. He'd also had Thor bring her one red rose as soon as she'd woken up. The single stem, the last of his floral deliveries, confirmed they had reached the end of their countdown. They were getting married today, in less than 2 hours. A thrill ran through Izzy's body. She sprang up from the bed and rushed to the closet where her wedding dress hung on the door. I better change. I don't want to be late to my own wedding. With Gracie's help, Izzy donned the long white gown. She slipped on a pair of toasty boots with red laces before taking her place in front of the mirror. The strapless bodice hugged her curves down to just below her hips where the dress flared out in a beautiful skirt made of tulle. Delicate embroidery, beading, and crystals cascaded down the entire dress in intricate lace motifs. This gown was fit for a princess or at least a celebrity. Izzy was neither, but she was marrying a man who treated her like royalty. How did she get so lucky? Gracie sighed happily as she stood next to Izzy. Chase is going to flip. I can't wait to see his reaction. Me too. Too bad we won't be able to see each other until the ceremony. Yeah, too bad. Gracie shifted her gaze and began fussing with the train of Izzy's dress. You'll see him soon enough, don't worry. Izzy eyed Gracie's flushed cheeks. You know something, don't you? What else does Chase have planned for today? No more questions, Mama. Gracie shot her an amused grin. Just enjoy your day. As if Izzy needed any more encouragement. She was already happier than she'd ever been in her life, thanks to Chase. Everything about today felt like a dream. Even the light but steady snowfall that had started since noon added a magical element to the day. Their little town was being blanketed in white just in time for Christmas. She couldn't ask for anything more. I can't believe Chase has more surprises planned. If Santa's not careful, he might be out of a job by tomorrow. That's actually not too far from the truth. Her eyes widened, and she clamped a hand over her mouth. I really should stop talking before I give everything away. Izzy laughed. She wanted to ask Gracie more, but the sound of bells in the distance stopped her. She lifted her dress carefully and moved to peer outside the window. A wooden sleigh with red seats led by 2 chestnut-colored horses pulled up in front of the inn. A man wearing a cowboy hat held the driver's reins. Behind him sat a dapper-looking gentleman in a black tuxedo. Her heart skipped as she pointed out the window. Is that Chase? Gracie grinned. He borrowed Santa's sleigh to take you and Thor to the wedding. At the sound of his name, the large black dog bounded in with a bright red bow tie clipped to his collar. Izzy gave Thor a playful scratch behind his ear. Don't you look handsome today? Are you ready to get this show on the road? Thor gave a hearty bark and trotted out of the room, pausing in the doorway for Izzy to join him. You go ahead, Mama. Brady and I will meet you at the Donaldson house. I'll bring your bouquet and Chase's boutonniere. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. Izzy gave Gracie a quick kiss on the cheek before she slipped on a red faux fur wrap. She followed Thor down the stairs and to the foyer just as the front door opened. Chase entered, his jaw dropping the moment he laid eyes on her. He seemed at a loss for words, but the tenderness in his eyes was all Izzy needed to see. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with desire. I didn't think you could get more beautiful, Izzy, but here you are. Almost makes me wish we had paparazzi following us around today. You're going to make me cry, Chase. She blinked back, the hot tears pooling in her eyes. Even if they didn't have every minute of this day photographed, this was one she'd never forget. Besides, so much of Chase's life was captured on film, having a private moment to themselves meant the world to her. He took a long stride to bridge the distance between them. With the pad of his thumb, he gently trailed a path down her cheek. I don't mind your tears as long as they're happy ones. She sniffled as she took in the sight of him. How well his broad shoulders filled out his tuxedo jacket with its silver jacquard floral pattern. The way his eyes lit up every time he held her gaze. And the flirtatious smile, reserved only for her, playing on his lips. There was no denying how happy Chase made her. Of course, they're happy tears. I'm marrying you. He reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips, and placed a soft kiss on her palm. Finally. It felt like this day would never come. But here it is, and I cannot wait to marry you. He gestured to the sleigh waiting outside. Are you ready, my love? Your chariot, and more surprises, await. Izzy quirked a brow. More surprises. If Chase only knew what she had hidden up her sleeve. She bit back a grin as she looked forward to surprising him too.
Chapter 16. Chase. There she is. Chase heard the whisper from his younger brother, who stood to his left side as his best man. He didn't need Lance to tell him Izzy was on her way down the aisle. He had spotted her seconds ago when she walked through the door. His heart skipped a beat as joy filled him to the brim. This was it. The moment he had been waiting for all his life. He always believed there was a woman out there for him and had been singing love songs to her ever since he picked up his first guitar. Today was the day for him to serenade Izzy in person, in front of their families and friends. He couldn't have pictured a more perfect occasion. Izzy had done wonders designing the decorations for the Donaldson house. The historic home, already stunning and elegant with its intricate architectural design, now exuded warmth and a sense of familiarity. Red and white poinsettias lined the front of the large brick fireplace where he, Lance, and the officiant Reverend Thomas stood. A large Christmas tree decked with twinkling white lights took up the corner behind them. Each of the guests' chairs had been tied with a red ribbon, while large vases with candles sitting on beds of berries sat on both sides of the center aisle. Chase's favorite part of the room was the scent, how the fresh pine from the wreaths hanging on the walls mingled with the fragrance of cinnamon from the apple cider bar near the entrance. It was everything magical that he loved about the holidays all in one room, including those near and dear to him. Chase exchanged a smile with his mom, who was sitting in the first row with Thor at her feet. Beside her sat Gracie's boyfriend Brady, who flashed him a thumbs up. In the seats behind them, he saw many familiar faces. Blake Grundy, the cowboy who'd brought them to the ceremony, along with his wife, Brooke. Marshall Duncan, a young man Izzy used to babysit when she was a teen. Earl Raleigh, a longtime resident of Romance. Their neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, and the shoppers he had invited from Valley Market. Dory, who'd been a guest at the interlude in the same time as him last fall, was here with her husband Lucas. Also present was Andy McKay, the first radio DJ from Romance to interview him. Fortunately, there were enough chairs available for everyone in attendance with some standing room in the back. Seeing so many people made his heart happy, but not as much as the sight of his beautiful bride. Even though he had seen Izzy already an hour ago during their sleigh ride, her very presence still stole his breath away. The way her gorgeous curves filled out the wedding gown that seemed custom-made for her. How she held her head up high as she strode toward him with Gracie by her side. And the hope that lit up her hazel eyes when she met his gaze across the sea of heads that turned her way. When the two women reached the front of the room, Gracie gave him a quick hug before placing Izzy's hand in his. "Mama's all yours, Chase. I know she's in good hands." Suddenly overcome with emotion, Chase had to work hard to get his words out. "Thank you, Gracie." Izzy eyed him with concern and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I hope those are happy tears," she murmured for his ears only. Her joke did the trick. Grinning, he looked straight into her eyes. "Nothing could make me happier than having you by my side, today and every day to come." Their gazes locked, and it was as if the whole world melted away like falling snowflakes. Only the crackle of the fire filled the silence, until Thor gave a hearty bark. Chase and Izzy tore their eyes away from each other as the whole room laughed. Reverend Thomas, a jolly man in his 60s who could have passed for Santa Claus, called for their attention. "I think that's my cue to get this show started. Thank you for coming this evening to celebrate the union of Chase Lockhart and Isabella Sutton." He continued his opening remarks, then gave a brief word of encouragement about marriage. All the while, Chase held Izzy's hand, drawing hearts over it with the pad of his thumb. His heart was so full of love for his bride, it was taking everything in him to not break out into song right then and there. Only a few moments more until they exchanged their vows. "The time has come for our couple to declare their commitment to one another," the officiant announced. "Chase has prepared a special presentation of his vows to Isabella. Chase, the floor is yours." Izzy glanced at him curiously as he took the guitar Lance handed him. He grinned and stepped up to the mic stand. "As you know, it's easier for me to express myself through song, so I decided to turn my vows into one. I wrote this while we were apart, when I was missing you like crazy. Every word is true and meant for you, Izzy." His gaze never leaving her beautiful face, Chase strummed the opening chords and began singing. "From the first time I saw you, I knew you were the one. Like a kid in love I fell hard, trying not to come undone. No turning back, just striving to be the man that you deserve." We dove in together, navigating the twists and turns. His voice began wavering halfway through the first verse when Izzy started crying. Maybe singing his vows wasn't the best idea, especially since he might not be able to finish them. He swallowed hard before starting in on the chorus. "We're hanging on to every moment, choosing to give forever a chance. Finding beauty in the broken, we're holding on to love and romance." Tears began falling down his face as well by the end of the song. He quickly wiped them away before rejoining Izzy at her side. "Chase, that was beautiful. My vows aren't nearly as good as yours." He took her hands in his and pulled her close. "Hey, I already know you love me, that's all that matters. Whatever you say to me now will be like an extra helping of bacon on top of an already perfect breakfast," he added with a wink. She nodded and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, a fresh batch of tears fell onto her cheeks. With a shaky breath, she began reciting her vows. Chase, you have become my strength, my soft landing, and my heart's home. From this day forward, I promise to be your duet partner in life, in love, and in music. You will no longer walk alone because I will match my rhythm and tempo to yours. I promise to be the harmony to your melody as we grow old together. I am, she smiled sweetly, your Bella, now and forevermore. A thrill shot through Chase's body from his head to his feet. Your Bella. Izzy was giving him the okay to call her Bella. She was truly opening her heart to him and sharing a sacred part of herself. If Chase thought it was hard keeping his emotions in check before, he was beyond hope now. The joy and excitement in his heart could no longer be contained. With one swift motion, he took Izzy in his arms and pulled her flush against himself. He leaned in, ready to kiss her, only to hear Reverend Thomas clear his throat loudly. I know you're eager to kiss your bride, but we still have the rings to exchange, he informed them with a hearty chuckle. Don't worry, we'll make it quick. Right, the rings. Chase laughed and took a step back. He knelt and beckoned for Thor to come over. The dog approached and sat calmly as Chase removed a pair of wedding bands that were attached to a ring holder on his collar. Thank you, boy. Thor barked and wagged his tail happily as he returned to his seat. Chase handed the personalized silver rings to Reverend Thomas, who raised them up for the guests to see. These rings symbolize the unending love Chase and Isabella have for one another. These have also been personalized with musical notes from their favorite piece of music, The Best Thing, which was the first song Isabella wrote for Chase. He passed the smaller of the two rings to Chase. Please repeat after me. This ring I give to you as a token of my love and devotion to you. I pledge to you all that I am and all that I will ever be as your husband. With this ring, I gladly marry you and join my life to yours. Sliding the ring onto Izzy's finger, Chase repeated the pledge, adding a kiss to her palm when he finished. Izzy's cheeks flushed with pleasure as she glanced at the ring, then back at him. Reverend Thomas handed the other ring to her with the same instructions. With a tender smile, she slipped the ring onto Chase's finger and stated, This ring I give to you as a token of my love and devotion to you. I pledge to you all that I am and all that I will ever be as your wife. With this ring, I gladly marry you and join my life to yours. All right. With a belly laugh that resembled a loud ho, 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 Reverend Thomas gave Chase and Izzy a nudge toward each other. By the power vested in me by the great state of Oregon, now pronounce you husband and wife. Chase, he winked, you may kiss your bride. Chase took a step forward and wrapped Izzy in his arms. With a hand on the small of her back, he pulled her in for their first kiss as husband and wife. The moment their lips touched, he tasted the sweetness of her love. Applause filled the air, along with Thor's happy barks. When they parted, Chase touched his forehead to hers and looked in her eyes. I love you with all my heart. A tender sigh escaped her lips as she tugged gently on the lapel of his jacket to draw him closer. I love you too, Chase. Thank you for holding on to love with me. Always, Bella, Chase promised, always. With their commitment to one another and the support of their family and friends, their future would certainly be beautiful and bright. After all, they lived in the beloved town of romance, where falling in love was never easier and happily ever after was always guaranteed.
The end. Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. To find out more about Liwen Waiho's other books, please visit her website at liwenho.com. And be sure to subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified when a new audiobook releases.